Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oops. My announcement folder is down here. Okay, announcements. The Town Hall offices will be closed on Monday, December 25th for the observance of Christmas, and Monday, January 1st for the observance of New Year's Day. The following dates have to do with budget meetings or regular town council meeting. Budget meeting, Monday, January 8th. The season has begun. At 6 p.m. here in the Matthew Thornton Room. Regular town council meeting, Thursday, January 11th, in this room at 7 p.m. Another budget meeting on Thursday, January 18th at 6 p.m. here in the Matthew Thornton Room. Another budget meeting Monday, January 22nd, 6 p.m., again here in this room. And a regular town council meeting on Thursday, January 25th at 7 p.m. Before I forget, Jackie Flood, Councilor Flood, is excused for this evening. Eileen? Oh, no, not yet. Too early. Oh, no, announcements. You got it. Thank you.
I just have one.
That's what happens when you miss a meeting. Get all discombobulated.
May I begin? The Merrimack Police Department has a couple more openings for the upcoming Police Citizens Academy. If you would like to learn more about the Merrimack Police Department, please contact Officer Rob Kelleher or stop by the station for an application. The group meets every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 9 for 10 weeks starting at the end of January. Please sign up today. It seems like the people that belong to that are very dedicated and really enjoy what they do and help out a lot. So if you're interested, please contact them. Thank you.
Before I forget, I did want to mention Lon Woods, who has been a member of actually several community organizations, as well as this town council, and is on the executive board of MVD. His wife has passed away recently, Kathy. So I'd like to take a minute just to have a moment of silence in her memory. Thank you. God bless, and may she rest in peace.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, PFOA update. As far as I know, there's nothing. Pete and Bill, anything? No update? No additional information?
No, just probably the one thing I would bring is the New Hampshire Drinking Water and Groundwater Commission will be reconvening in January. We got 2 meetings in January. I hope to have updates as it relates to the town of Merrimack at forthcoming meetings. So thank you.
Excellent.
And just Bill and I, as liaisons, are going to meet with the Concerned Citizens group. Was it the 22nd or 23rd?
22nd or 23rd
of January.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Yes, Eileen.
I also wanted to let you know that I continue to call Clark, the Assistant Commissioner of DES, every week to find out what's new and that he can share. And this last time he said he can't say anything. So, I mean, I just wanted to make sure that you understand that I haven't forgotten or.
You're still
still
notifying him and harping.
Hounding.
Good.
Yes.
Good. Hounding, yeah. Okay, highway garage project update. Finley, anything?
Yes, just a real quick summary. On the 13th, the Highway Garage Committee met and finalized the floor plans for the facility, and they had a representative from Solar to talk to them about the possibility of using solar in our in the garage. And otherwise, things are moving along in a timely fashion.
Things will be moving quickly at some point, just right? A lot of this is planning.
Yes, yeah.
Comments from the press or public? Anyone? Seeing none. There are no recognitions, resignations, or retirements. Neither are there any appointments. Okay, public hearing. Public hearing regarding consideration of changes to chapters of the Merrimack Town Code, and this has to do with Chapter 81, water lines. This has been previously gone through its reading. Now it's a public hearing. Is there anything new to be added to these revisions, Paul or Eileen? Nothing. Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing at 7:13. Is there anyone in the public who would like to make a comment? Well, the rush. Okay. So I'm going to close it at 7:14.
Madam Chair, I
Council,
move,
go ahead.
Madam Chair, I move Chapter 81 to the consent agenda.
Motion made by Bill Boyd, second by Peter Albert. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. So that'll be 6-0-0. Legislative updates from state reps. I do not see any here, so I'm assuming that's no. Town managers report.
The Merrimack Police want to remind everyone that there is no overnight parking on any town street from now until April 15th. The Planning Board will have an initial public hearing for a site plan of the mixed-use development near the Merrimack Premium Outlets in January, which is really exciting. I don't think it's been modified that much from the one that they originally did. It's a big mixed-use project with a hotel, conference center, apartments, businesses, really quite the project. So anyway, the site plan calls for 372,800 square feet of development, and I just said everything that's on here. So the initial public hearing for the site plan for the multifamily development on Executive Park Drive, which is the one past the new hotel, will take place on January 2nd, and the staff expects that the project will require multiple hearings, including traffic analysis by the state, because it's a state-controlled road, as well as the applicant themselves, and then we do a peer review kind of thing on that too. The town's engineering review consultants and state agencies can be taken into account. The Planning Board met with staff from the Nashua Regional Planning Commission on December 5th to discuss the initial progress, on the Route 3 pedestrian and bicycle plan. Information, including the map of the existing conditions of the corridor, can be found on the Planning Board page of the town website under News and Events. And the reason why I'm digging in my purse here is because Matt Kasparius had an email for me, which I cannot find. Now that I have the big purse. Oh, here it is. Sorry, I don't need to hold you up, but it really, really interesting, exciting things going on with the library and with Parks and Recreation, and I'm just really delighted with the quality of life types of things that are expanding in our town. So Matt Kasparius, Parks and Recreation Director, has left copies of the winter activities brochure in your mailbox, which is really nice. And the annual holiday parade and tree lighting was held on Sunday, December 3rd, and we had fewer floats this year than normal, but had more than 600 people in attendance at the tree lighting. Abbey Griffin Park was completely packed, and the event went smoothly, and there were no major issues. And that's about it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, consent agenda. Consideration of changes to chapters of the Merrimack Town Code. This is final reading. The Town Council to consider the acceptance of recommended changes to Chapter 119, which has to do with dogs, Chapter 128, which is firearms, and Chapter 181, which is the traffic and special event management.
Move the consent agenda.
Motion made by Bill Boyd, seconded by Finley Rothaus.
No, actually, I don't mind seconding it.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just that last week, or 2 weeks ago, we had to move them individually, even though it's on the consent agenda.
Ah, okay. Well, then let me modify that. Would please, Bill, do you want to make a motion for Chapter 119?
So moved.
Bill Boyd and Finley Rothaus. Okay, any other discussion about that one chapter? None. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. 600. Okay, Chapter 128, firearms motion.
So moved.
Bill Boyd, second by Peter Albert. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? One opposed?
No,
Oh, okay. 600. And the last chapter, 181, which
So
is
moved.
the traffic and special event management. Bill Boyd, seconded by Tom. Oh, I'm sorry. Tom Koenig.
Tom T. did.
Oh, Tom. Oh, my God. It's the first time I've had to do two Toms. Tom squared. Well, that's true, but I was used to Tom. Okay. Okay, all those in favor, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. 600.
Can I just point out quickly for people that
Absolutely.
may have tuned in this week, this is the third time we've addressed these particular issues, and so it's considered consent agenda. It's considered something we don't have to discuss unless somebody brought it up at the public hearing or has a particular problem. Just for those watching that haven't been following us and wondered why we just kind of breezed through those. We've spent a lot of time looking at them already. Thank you.
Points well taken. Yeah, this is there's a first reading, then there's a public hearing. So by the time they get to the consent agenda, you're absolutely right. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, old business. Post-issuance tax compliance policy, New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank. Well, this is a tongue twister. New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank bond. Paul?
Point of order. Why is that old business? I don't think I've ever talked about a policy like this in the past.
I believe the reason why they put it on old business is because it has to do with the highway garage bond. We could take it up as new business.
I really don't care. I'm just curious as to
I think it's because it's related to the highway
Related to
garage
the hi-
bond
okay.
and the bond that we've been talking about for the last couple of meetings.
Okay, and this is related to a new criteria related to it.
Correct.
Okay. Is that, John?
Yeah,
Is that-
yeah,
Okay. I understand your
Struck me
question.
as odd.
Go right ahead, Paul.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. With the issuance of the highway garage bond, we are planning on going out for bid on these bonds with the bond bank by January 15th. And one of the items that we need to assure the people who are going to buy these bonds and invest in these bonds is that they are going to be tax exempt, so they can get the tax exempt interest as an investment. And one of the ways to create that tax exempt is that the town of Merrimack enters into this policy. And basically, legal counsel has written up this memorandum summarizing it, and it's a lot of legalese. To simplify it is that basically what is going to happen is that whatever the bond rate is that we're paying on interest, say we're paying 2% for interest, we're not going to invest it in something that's going to garner us 5% interest and then turn around and use that interest to offset the tax rate. We have to, whatever we get or whatever we're paying in interest is basically what we can invest in until we expend the funds. That's the first thing. The second thing is that because it's a municipal project and we're using the municipality as a tax exemption, if in fact later on we then sell the highway garage to a private firm or a private company and they take it over, we need then to report that to the bond issuance or the bond bank, and then that bond would not become tax exempt because a private industry owns it and not a municipality anymore. Or if we sell off a portion of we rent out, say, the equipment bays, things of that sort. So that's what this is saying. The other thing it's asking for is that you list a compliance coordinator, and the compliance coordinator should not be a person's name but a position, such as the finance director. And then there's a resolution that needs to be made. It's at the very back of all the policy here. And the resolution basically states that you understand through the federal law, the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, and that you have appointed this person and you'll comply with, basically your compliance person will comply with all the tax exempt filings and notices that are needed in the time. And if they had come in and have an audit and things of that sort, we'll be able to provide the documentation to show that we did not invest in 5% interest. We invested in reasonable interest at the time.
Okay. Now, I notice, go ahead, Eileen.
From what I gather, this really isn't anything new as far as the rules are concerned. This is just setting them down on paper, because they've always been tax exempt to the people, but people need to have, now they need to have proof that it actually is tax exempt in order to have the interest be tax exempt. And there's always been a rule having to do with arbitrage, which is what Paul was talking about, getting money at a certain lower interest and investing it and making money off of it. So, you know, as I said, they're just tightening up the language and making sure that we sign off on various things. It's really, nothing has changed in issuance of bonds.
So I see here a resolution that
Correct.
we have to publicly read.
That would be something that you would vote on, and yes, you would read it.
So it'll be part of the motion, probably.
It should be, the motion should be the resolution.
Okay. First of all, is there any questions? Pete?
Yep. Paul, would you be the coordinator?
It would be the finance director's position, whoever that might be. Because
So-
this bond is a 20-year bond,
So it would be.
and I'd be
finance-
real old in 20 years.
The idea
So
is to
the
put finance
quoted
director in the
coordinator is
slot.
gonna,
Yeah.
you're gonna fill in the blank as town
Finance.
finance director?
Yeah, town finance director.
Thank you.
And we'd have to sign this tonight anyway, so it'd have to be filled in.
Correct.
Bill?
And we could write that in.
Does it have to be the finance director? I mean, we could do the assistant finance director, we could do the town treasurer, could we not?
I would stay away from the town treasurer right now because of the resolution that will be coming before you shortly that was voted on with the charter change last year. You could do the assistant or deputy finance director. However,
I mean, I could do.
you always have a finance director in the town of Merrimack.
My question is, I could do the deputy director of DPW, I could do supervisor of,
No.
I mean, so this is what I'm getting at, is it,
You could do those, but they don't have the financial background to sit there and explain to somebody what arbitrage is and what did they get on interest.
so the purpose of having a compliance coordinator is to put somebody that has the professional expertise to explain the financial mechanisms that are behind the policy, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, I'd like to have a motion. In that motion, I suppose we're going to have to read the resolution. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, whereas the town of Merrimack of New Hampshire, hereinafter referred to as the town, from time to time on a tax-exempt basis issues, 1, bonds and bond anticipation notes to finance capital projects, 2, tax anticipation notes to pay the town maintenance and operation expenses, and 3, municipal leases to finance the lease purchase of certain equipment, all pursuant to the provisions of New Hampshire RSA Chapter 33 as amended. And whereas the federal income tax laws, including the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 as amended, hereinafter referred to as the Code, require that issuers of tax-exempt debt comply with certain post-issuance requirements set forth in the Code. And furthermore, whereas for the purposes of maximizing the likelihood that the town complies with such requirements of the Code, the Board of the Selectmen of the town, hereinafter referred to as the Board, desires to adopt the post-issuance tax compliance policies and procedures attached hereto as Exhibit A. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board, as follows, votes that the post-issuance tax compliance policy and procedures attached hereto as Exhibit A are hereby approved, and voted that the Board hereby names the Finance Director as the coordinator under the post-issuance tax compliance policies and procedures, and that the Finance Director has accepted said such nomination. And lastly, that this resolution shall take effect from and after its adoption.
Question. You want a second or you want a question?
Both.
Okay, so motion made by Bill Boyd, second by Finley Rothaus. You now have a question.
No, actually, I didn't know if it should be a friendly amendment to change what is actually printed on our document as Board of Selectmen to Town Council.
We can change that. I saw that.
Okay,
I
so.
heard it.
And I was
Okay.
going to suggest that, so. okay.
So I have the official copy here to be signed.
We'll write up a new one. We'll type in the date that you did the resolution. We'll
Okay,
change
and we'll
Town
have it in the
Council,
sign file?
and you'll have it in the sign file.
Okay.
And by the
I'm
way,
gonna
I do
avoid
accept the
this.
nomination.
I'm just
I
going
didn't know
to
you had a
avoid,
choice.
I'm going to avoid the copy that was in the sign. Okay. Right. Okay, so a motion's been made with a second. Any other discussion or questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. 600. Okay, new business. Warrant article to study the feasibility of developing offshore wind power, submitted by Mary Beth Raven. Resident Mary Beth Raven requests the town council consider putting a warrant article on the ballot for the spring of 2018, which relates to joining existing efforts in Massachusetts and Maine to study the feasibility of developing offshore wind power in the Gulf of Maine. Now, while you're being prepared, I just want to be able to clarify our options for this, okay? Number one, if asked, the town, and you can be listening to make sure if I'm not correct. The town. Nancy, want to read that? Oh, you wrote it up. Okay. Okie dokie. Okay, it was probably what I had written down too. Okay. This resident, Mary Beth Raven, thought that she needed to get this on the ballot as a warrant article by getting 25 signatures of registered voters. I called her, and this is a memo from Eileen. An email, I'm sorry. I called her and told her our options, which are: one, she can simply ask the council to write a letter of support to the governor. If you say yes, that will be all that is necessary. She told me that Portsmouth and Durham City Town Council have done this already. Number two, she can request that it be put on the ballot as a warrant article. She would need 50, not the 25 she thought she needed, registered voters. Diane Trippett would then need to verify the names. Next, the council will hold a public hearing. With this method, the council can still opt to put it or not put it on the ballot as an article. And the third option is she can get 500 signatures of registered voters. The process would be the same as number two. We would have to have a public hearing. Okay, I thought someone was going to ask a question. Whether you can choose as a town council to endorse that or not, but it would be put on the ballot. Okay. So that about sums it up. And is that as your understanding, Eileen? Go ahead.
Just one further thing. Because it's not a money-related article, and the townspeople, it's the town council that's responsible for anything that does not relate to money. Even if the 500 signatures were on there, and then it went to the ballot, which it would be required to do, and the people voted to do it, you wouldn't have to send the letter anyway, because it's not money. So
So it would not be a requirement
Yeah.
to respond to it. Okay.
So when I spoke to Ms. Raven, I suggested to her that her first best bet would be to come and do a presentation and request that the council send a letter.
That's correct.
Of support.
Yes, and thank you very much for calling me in
Well-
advance.
Turn on your mic, please.
Thank you very much in advance for calling me to educate me on my options before the meeting.
Okay, so have you decided on an option? I know you're going to do a presentation, but...
Yeah, if I think the most expedient option that still sends the kind of message that I think we might want to send
Okay.
would be to have the town council send a letter to the governor.
And that would be in support of
Correct, in support of
studying
offshore
feasibility.
wind. Correct.
Okay. Okay, now that we have a framework, go right ahead.
All right. So
least
I
I
understand
needed it.
I have about 5 minutes to give the presentation.
Yep,
So
that's
feel free
great.
to stop me if I go over.
If we stop you, you'll get additional time. How's that?
All right, so quick presentation on why I think Merrimack should ask the governor for an offshore wind task force. And I'm supported here tonight by several other Merrimack residents who are sitting here with me: Gina Rosati, Deborah Huff, Alicia Flanders. Carol DePiero could not make it, but she has seen the presentation and we have discussed it. So it is not me acting alone, but there are already several members of the community who are requesting this. So offshore wind has already been identified a few years ago by a legislative study committee as one of the best options for renewable energy in New Hampshire. That committee recommended that the governor at that time request this task force, and the governor at that time did not do so. And this was 2014, so that was 3 years ago. What we do know from various other studies, like the study that Maine did, was that we think the coastal wind of New Hampshire can provide capacity to produce about 2,600 megawatts of energy, and that might be enough to provide almost all of New Hampshire with electricity. We don't know exactly how much, because we need to do a study for our own offshore wind potential. But the idea here is that it could be significant, you know, anywhere from, well, 0, which is what it is now, all the way up to potentially 100, although we probably don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket and have 100% of our energy, electrical energy, come from offshore wind. So what needs to happen if we're going to go ahead is that to bring offshore wind to New Hampshire, Governor Sununu has to ask for a task force to be convened, and he has to ask the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and we usually call that BOEM, right? And then this task force studies the feasibility of offshore wind in New Hampshire. It talks to stakeholders like us, like towns along the seacoast. And then if things look good, they would start the leasing process for the area where the wind turbines will go. We don't know yet how far offshore. It might be about 12 miles. Federal offshore area might be involved, that kind of thing. The part that New Hampshire needs to play is that this task force has to have certain representatives on it. You know, legislators, they might be from the energy, committee from either the House or the Senate or both, maybe people from the Public Utilities Commission, maybe people from the Site Evaluation Committee, or other people. The only cost to New Hampshire would be the time that these people would have to invest in being on this task force. Earlier this summer on a talk show, someone called in and asked the governor about it, and he said if folks want to bring it up, offshore wind, and they want to try to make that happen in New Hampshire, I'm not opposing it. So that was kind of the impetus for trying to get towns and businesses actually to write letters of support to the governor. So our thought here is that if we can show Governor Sununu that there's community support, then he'll request the task force. And either a warrant article, resolution, either one would show that Merrimack supports this in some way. And now I have a few slides on why would Merrimack want offshore wind, and they fall into 3 categories. First is local jobs and economic benefit. Second is the ability to rely on local power. And third is that wind power, offshore wind in particular, has advanced quite a bit in the last few years, and the costs of generating electricity from wind have declined, even in the 3 years since the study was done. I think I'm almost out of time. I have okay. Okay, I just want to. Okay. You're doing really well. Okay, thank you. So the first is local jobs and economic benefit. It's possible that thousands of local jobs will be created. We don't know exactly how many because we haven't done the study. Maine did the study, and they concluded that in the construction and maintenance of the offshore wind that they want to do, 16,000 jobs would be created. We do understand, however, that Maine has a lot more offshore area than New Hampshire does. And second, there's potential for $15 billion worth of increase to coastal economies. Now, this $15 billion number comes nationally on both coasts, East Coast and West Coast. So we don't know how much that might be for New Hampshire. Again, the Maine study supported a good chunk of that, and by increase in economy, it includes things, the construction, the maintenance, and also right down to additional, workers coming in and paying for their lunch perhaps, or, other things. There doesn't, no tourist dollars were considered because we don't think wind turbines are going to be a tourist attraction, except that we do have an operating, the nation's first offshore wind farm right off of Block Island, and lo and behold, Block Island is finding that it's actually a tourist attraction, and people are taking boat tours out there and stuff like that. So who knows? So the second of three reasons I listed is local energy. As I'm sure you guys are well aware, about 60% of electricity in New Hampshire is generated from natural gas that comes from out of state. And this results in billions of dollars leaving the state. And we do have other projects like Northern Pass, and they're still coming to us from out of the country. That's coming to us from Canada. Offshore wind turbines would be about 12 miles off the coast. So that's much closer than hydro from Canada or natural gas from Pennsylvania or oil from Latin America. So it's a much more reliable, safer bet because it is local and we're not paying all that money, whether it's to Mexico to import oil or to other places for other sources of energy. And the third area is the technology has improved and the costs have gone way down. The technology used has advanced significantly. For example, the turbines themselves they've discovered how to make them much lighter. So they'll blow easier, they're easier to construct, they're easier to transport, things like that. The costs have declined, making wind more competitive with other methods of generating electricity. And we do know that we have commercial wind farms on land that are successful. We've got 4% of all the electricity in the nation comes from wind right now. And Iowa and South Dakota generate 25% of their electricity from onshore wind. And as I just mentioned, the USA's first offshore wind farm near Block Island is a success. And by success, I mean a couple things. One, the company who built it, Deepwater Wind, was able to fund it completely from a French bank, Société Générale. So Rhode Island taxpayers didn't have to pay a levy on their electricity bill or things that other energy companies have requested. And second of all, it's now up and running. It's to power the residents of Block Island, and as I'm sure you know, Block Island in the summer has a lot of residents, and in the winter it doesn't. In the summer, they were using diesel fuel, and diesel boats were coming to Block Island, and they had a diesel generation plant, and residents of Block Island were paying 47 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity. Now that the wind turbines are in place, they're paying about 24 cents an hour. That's great news for them. We pay right now about 16 cents a kilowatt hour. So part of why we want this study is to know if we build wind turbines, how much will it cost, at what point will it break even, that kind of thing. Is it going to be feasible for us who are paying only 16 cents an hour, that kind of thing. And also, many European countries have offshore wind farms. The UK has the largest one. There are wind farms in the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, Germany, France, and Poland, all along the North Sea. It's cold and windy up there, I guess. And then we've got Asian countries who are also investing in offshore wind: China, Japan, South Korea, and Australia. So offshore wind is relatively new to the United States, but it's not new to the rest of the world. And so we can learn best practices, we can learn about environmental issues if there are any from other installations. So it shouldn't be too terribly scary and risky. We're not the first ones in the world ever doing this. And as Eileen's letter mentioned, I went back and I gave a presentation, I sent a presentation to you folks a week ago, and since then there have been a few additions. So Dover, Durham, and Portsmouth have already passed resolutions supporting the study of offshore wind. Newcastle has scheduled a warrant article for their town meeting, which is in May. And then other towns that are considering resolutions or warrants are the following: Alstead, Concord, Exeter, Henniker, Hopkinton, Lee, Marlborough, Newfields, Nottingham, Rindge, and Rye. And these are people like myself who are going to their towns and talking to the towns about it. And we're hoping to get more towns and cities on that list as we go forward. So we've decided that we want the resolution, the letter to the governor, not a warrant. I took a sample resolution. This is the resolution that Portsmouth wrote. Of course, we can customize this to be more specific to the needs or desires or opinions of Merrimack, but I wanted to give you one just to get an idea of what the other towns did. Any questions?
Sorry, Finley.
Thank you for all this. But the project on Block Island, it had absolutely no subsidies from the government at all?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
according to the literature I've read, it was fully funded by this French bank, Société Générale.
Thank you.
I'm a former French teacher, so.
Oh, no
yeah.
wonder. I said, she must have practiced that for a long time. She didn't. She knew everything.
You knew it anyway.
Exactly. Other questions?
So, Mary Beth, just to try and bring out some of the obvious fears people have of wind farms, the fear of damage to wildlife and things of that nature, either from the construction and the tearing up the land, or the harm for birds flying by, because suddenly there's this big death trap as a bird tries to fly through where they don't expect anything to be, in a
big
blade
open
comes down and
space.
smacks them into
Absolutely.
dust.
Absolutely. Right.
Can you address those issues? Is it better
I do
offshore?
have
or-
one chart that addresses the birds, and yes, I'll be perfectly honest, wind turbines do kill birds. This data comes from research done on bird deaths in Canada and the U.S. per year. And you'll see that wind turbines are third from the bottom at 400,000, and that is a significant number of birds, but collisions with buildings cause over 1 million. Cats.
Well, we're going to have to get rid of those buildings.
Exactly.
Yes, that's good.
Cats kill more birds. But I definitely, I
House
do,
cats.
we do want to be mindful of the environmental issues. I think some of our history, we thought some other forms of energy were safe, and then as we learned more, we learned that they weren't quite as safe as we were hoping. So I know that it will have some impact on birds. The National Wildlife Federation, NWF, has been paying very close attention to the Block Island wind farm. They were very concerned about marine life, particularly marine life that uses sonar, whales and dolphins. During the construction, and I had a chat with somebody from National Wildlife Federation about this specific issue. They had somebody whose full-time job was to watch for whales and dolphins, and if they were going to do any blasting, they had to stop and wait until they swim away. And they're now the ones in Block Island are in relatively shallow water, so they are rooted or sunk into the ground, and they're watching what happens there. Barnacles and mussels and stuff like that have started growing, and they think that that's a good thing, and it will make some kind of an artificial reef that overall should be a good thing. The turbines that may or may not end up offshore here in New Hampshire are probably going to be deeper water, and they might be floating turbines that are then tethered to the ground. They would not be the first of its kind. Other countries have done this, but it might have different impacts. We don't really know what they are yet, but so far, other than bird deaths, nothing that's clearly detrimental.
Okay, thank you. I think that's important to know, especially the concern about whales and porpoises and stuff and what that might do, because it's something we don't understand.
Right,
So we have to be mindful of those kind of things.
absolutely.
Any other questions? I guess that was my concern as well, but when you're really considering it, and it's important for me to know what your true intention was. And the letter is really requesting that a study be done.
Correct.
And part of the study is that kind of, I would think.
Exactly,
Would be
exactly.
part of those risk-benefit factors
Exactly.
and things like that. So personally, I'm leaning toward writing a letter of support to look at the feasibility. No harm, no foul, as far as I'm. That
Not
was
a bird.
unintended.
Wow.
Unintended.
Nicely slipped in.
I know.
I get it.
I wish I knew that was intentional. It wasn't. Anyway, oh well. The reality is it doesn't do any harm, and I think whenever you are being requested to even request a study, what harm is there? You know. Yes, Bill.
I was going to echo and agree with you, just based on having followed the project down in Nantucket Sound with Cape Wind and looking at some of the things that have gone up in Maine. Maine was actually had given a contract to an outfit out of Norway, Statoil, that was going to build a wind farm up in the Gulf of Maine, and Governor LePage pulled the plug on that, wanting to have the floating projects done through the University of Maine. Get the engineering students involved with that particular project. So I think I certainly would support a study, only because, having watched, having grown up south of the border, having watched, everything transpired down on the Cape and watch 17 years of work kind of get tossed asunder because the two major contractors, Eversource and I forget the one other supplier, decided that they were going to back out at the last minute, and the Cape Wind project basically drowned, pun intended, because their contracts.
But there was a lot of political.
Oh, of course, there was a lot of
stuff
political
going on
stuff.
with that.
Well, and that's why we do studies, that's why we get BOEM involved.
That's right.
It's
Yeah,
a
so
little
I-
bit more involved now, but
So I think supporting, I think asking the council to submit a letter to the governor asking him to support the concept of a study to look at offshore wind, and I certainly have no objection to it.
Well, yes, Pete?
It's interesting that it's offshore, because I regularly go up to Plymouth and I see New Hampshire Electrical Cooperative's turbines going all the time up there. I think they got like 12 of them running across a ridge. And I don't know if you've looked into this, but is it just people don't want a turbine near their house? It's the unsightliness of it or something? on the end?
my understanding is, I mean, there are other efforts for onshore wind,
Okay.
but that at least in the initial studies, and of course the Gulf of Maine is, our 11 miles of coast is the Gulf of Maine. The estimates for offshore wind are there, the estimates are that we can get a lot more energy generation from the offshore wind than we can from the onshore wind. At least that's the initial understanding.
Thank you.
And there definitely are issues with visibility and damage to wildlife and stuff like that for the construction and maintenance and all that kind of stuff with onshore wind farms.
Kelly?
And we think that these would be about 12 miles offshore, I have to do the study. And according to this, if this photograph is totally accurate, at about 10 miles, you sort of can't see it anymore. The Cape Wind project and the Block Island wind farm, Block Island is much closer, and it's only about 5 miles offshore, and you can see them.
Falmouth, Massachusetts had a few, and the last I heard, they were, sorry about that. They were, there was a request of the community, I think it went on their ballot to shut them down. And there was the bird, casualties, there was a concern, but apparently for the locals living close to it, there's a resonance that it might affect the whales that you were speaking to. I don't know if it's the same thing, but that really bothers some people. And hard for me to understand that, but that was the complaints and so on. So offshore obviously takes care of that from a human standpoint. So as far as that, and I did have another question I'll have to.
My foul comment made it, yeah.
Yeah, it took it right away from me.
That's right. I'll
Tom?
go and then maybe I'll
Yeah, bring it back.
judge you right now. Yeah, you know what? I'll support the study to go look at it, but if you were asking for anything else, I just don't see how this brings local jobs and economics to Merrimack. I heard a lot about state of New Hampshire and things like that, and it
Right,
could eventually,
understood.
which is great.
And this is a request of the governor, so the governor
Yeah.
cares about Portsmouth or those cities,
Absolutely.
but I
'Cause
do
we have,
understand your point.
we have
Right.
representatives for our district that will do that for us. But, but if this was anything other than that, then,
Getcha.
It doesn't seem
I feel
like
the same
it's-
way, too.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I
just
agree.
let you go, that's all. But
Did
thank
you
for the
think of it,
presentation.
Finley?
I remember.
Okay.
I seen the one in Denmark, and
But
it's
stop before I forget it.
impressive.
I didn't know if it's something that, I don't know that there is a rush with the one community, Newmarket, I think it was, is doing it
May.
in May. I didn't know if it's something that we would want to put on the ballot for that commentary from the town, as opposed to just us. It doesn't,
I think the fourth option is that we could decide to put it on the ballot as a
well,
town
that's what I mean.
council.
That makes it
Yeah.
easier. There's no signature requirement.
True.
And so that'd be the question we ask Mary Beth, is, do you think there's an urgency where we would need to get this to the governor
And
sooner
when
than
is our
later, or?
town meeting again?
April.
I was going to
April.
say April.
I mean, that way it
Is
would
this
be a good
related to it,
representation.
Pete?
is what I
Yeah, can
think.
I-
Pete had a question related to it.
Well,
Go
it's not a
ahead.
question, it's,
Or comment.
I mean, I think we're all, it's a study, we're looking at a study, and and I think, all right, it's not a bad thing to look at any options on a table that we have that, so to me, if this is something we can do tonight, I'm fine with that. We're talking about suggesting a study of feasibility, so I'm all right with that. So if we could make a motion tonight to do the letter,
Well, do
I'm
you want-
okay with
do you
that
want to make
personally.
that motion?
So, Madam Chair, I would move
Bill?
that the town council authorize
Oh,
the
Pete?
town manager and/or her
Or Bill?
proxy to write a letter urging Governor Sununu to request the formation of an intergovernmental task force focused on studying the feasibility of developing offshore wind power in the Gulf of Maine, period.
Motion made by Bill Boyd, seconded by Peter Albert.
Question?
Go right ahead, Eileen.
Paul just made the point that it really needs to come from the town council, so you should probably write, I can draft the letter, but you really
That's
should
fine.
sign it.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None.
Thank you very much for
600.
Thank you, Mary.
time
You're
and
very
attention.
welcome.
Thank you, Mary Beth.
Good
You
job
did,
tonight,
you did
thank
a
you.
nice presentation, thank you.
And I didn't know we had a 5-minute time limit. I never heard that before.
Oh.
Actually, it was 15, but she
Okay.
did it.
She's a professional.
Yes, it's nice that someone stuck to the 15. Usually people don't. Okay, Chief Borneman, Assistant Chief Borneman, I've just promoted you. Assistant
Well,
Fire Chief Brian Borneman, you have the next 3 items.
Wow, and he gets 10 minutes for each one, or no? 10 minutes,
take that
5
long.
minutes, and
The first
10
one-
I
minutes.
was told back there to be quick.
As if you had to be told. Okay, donation acceptance, there are 3 of them, let's go one at a time. Town Council will consider the acceptance and expenditure of several donations made to the Merrimack Fire Department in memory of Isabel Duxbury in the amount of $295, and also another one in memory of Judge H. Shapiro in the amount of $325. So go right ahead. Assistant Chief, I basically just said the whole thing, didn't I?
You did, and you did a great job. Thank you, Madam Chair, councilors. Over the last several months, and then you're back up there, we were fortunate enough, unfortunately, Isabella Duxbury passed away, and her family had, in lieu of flowers, requested that money be donated to the fire department. It should be noted, I put there, that she was the wife of former Fire Chief Herb Duxbury, who served the town a long time. And those donations were totaling $295. In your backup, I actually broke down what they were, by who, and where they were from. And then, again, we had a similar thing with George Shapiro and his family. George Shapiro was a resident on and off here in Merrimack, but involved a lot with Nashua and Merrimack youth, most specifically Merrimack YMCA Teen Nights, coached boys basketball at the high school and softball, but their family wanted to donate it to Merrimack Fire Department. So I was looking for acceptance of those donations on behalf of the department.
And expenditure.
And expend, yes. Accept and expend.
Okay, so that the motion has to be, because you could take the money, but you wouldn't be able to spend it.
I
So
will defer to you.
be careful on that.
Wow.
Okay, motion for the acceptance and expenditure.
Do you want me to do one complete motion or 3 separate motions, Madam
I
Chair?
believe we can
We
do
only
the
talked
one
about
at a
2 so
time.
far.
We've only talked about the first one, which is the $295 and the $325.
Okay, Madam Chair, I move that the town council accept and expend 2 donations made to the Merrimack Fire Department in the memory of Isabel Duxbury in the amount of $295, in the memory of George H. Shapiro in the amount of $325, pursuant to RSA 31:95-B and Charter Article 8-15, and furthermore, that the town manager or her proxy be authorized to sign anything necessary to accept and expend.
Motion made by Bill Boyd, second by Peter Albert. Any questions? None. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 600. New business number 3, another donation. Town Council to consider the acceptance and expenditure of a donation from Ann Moran in the amount of $150 to the Merrimack Fire Department. Assistant Chief?
Yeah, like you'd stated, Madam Chair, Ms. Moran was in a significant motor vehicle accident in Merrimack back in 2016. I'm not going to get into all of that stuff, but her husband walked in approximately a year after and said that she didn't come, it was him, and handed us a check and
thanked us for the care that the firefighters and EMS personnel gave her that day, and thought that it made a significant impact in her ultimately recovery and convalescence. I stressed he did not need to do that, and he said we absolutely do want to do that. So that's what that is.
Excellent. Motion?
Madam Chair, I move that the town council accept and expend a donation from Ann Moran in the amount of $150 to the Merrimack Fire Department pursuant to RSA 31:95-B and Charter Article 8-15, and furthermore, that the town manager or her proxy be authorized to accept, expend, sign whatever is needed to accept and expend the donation.
Second? Who? Which one of you? Tom K. I just heard the A. I didn't know which one. Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. 600. And last but not least, Town Council to consider the acceptance and expenditure of a donation from the Digital Federal Credit Union to the Merrimack Fire Department in the amount of $3,500. Nice.
This is the second year of them doing this
I remember
unsolicited. Their program, I guess, is, for lack of a better word, is to assist the Department in Public Safety in making a difference in the community. At this point, we haven't identified a use for this yet.
Right.
But it would either be for training or... What's that?
The police need some.
I think she got some. I'm sure we can find a perfect use within the spirit of how they gave it to us.
Paul?
I just want to mention, Digital Federal Credit Union has also came forward, and the police got $3,500. So this is the second or third year in a row that they have given the town of Merrimack $7,000, $3,500 for police and $3,500 for fire. So they have been stepping up to the plate to be a good community.
Okay, I have, Peter, remember you brought up those plaque kind of things that we should be considering to be given to people as a thank you? This is exactly the kind of thing we're
Agreed.
talking about, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let them, and hopefully they display it at their Merrimack branch.
Now, what is the status of that now that we're, do you know, did you submit it? What I'm talking about is Peter Albert had made a point
Yeah,
of
Becky-
we're developing something that would be able to give to people or organizations that they could display as a thank you for
Becky,
these kinds of things.
It's like a pewter medallion with the town symbol on it and can be placed on a plaque, which I think, in light of the generousness of digital, we should place it on a plaque. It's worthy of placing it on a plaque. And, it's a lot of money and a lot of good
We should-
training that you'll
And we
get
should
out of it.
acknowledge that they can display in public, is
Yeah.
my point.
Yep.
Yes,
And-
Eileen, I'm sorry.
May I also suggest that we either have the fire department and/or the police department write letters of thanks to Digital Credit Union, and also tell them exactly what it was that you spent the money on and how valuable
Yep.
it was to
Right.
you.
I'd follow
Peter?
up with that when each of the individuals, knowing the fire and police department will probably do it anyways, but
Right.
that all those folks, and I kind of get a kick out of seeing the contribution from the Duxbury family, who go back years and years and generations, and then you look down the list of donors, and it's a who's who of fire department members, families.
So I guess we'll have a motion related to the donation, but at the same time, I'd like us to look into the activation of that display and make sure that this is done for them. Yes?
What's there to look into? We've got the pewter plate, just a matter of getting a plaque and coming up with appropriate language to put on the plaque.
My point is, let's establish and do it instead of talking about it. I'm sorry, Finley. Go
No,
ahead.
I'm just thinking, is there a
I'm just saying, do it.
threshold where we kick into something like that? It's something not for tonight's discussion.
Right.
But
At what
So
point?
that's why I don't know, I mean, it's simple, but I think we still have to have
A
little
discussion
thought put
about
into
the
it, yeah.
criteria?
Yes,
Okay, but can we agree that this would be one occasion where the
I think so,
criteria?
yeah.
Did you want to say something, Tom?
I just wanted to point out that we don't want to use the donated funds to pay for that. We need to make sure there's something in our budget to pay for that.
Agreed.
I have a public relations line.
Agreed. So let's have a motion to accept and expend.
Madam Chair, I move that the town council accept and expend the donation from Digital Federal Credit Union to the Merrimack Fire Department in the amount of $3,500 pursuant to RSA 31:95-B and Charter Article 8-B. Furthermore, that the town manager or her proxy be authorized to sign to accept and expend the donation received, and that furthermore, let the town manager be authorized to provide a suitable plaque with language to Digital Federal Credit Union to express our sincerest gratitude for being a strong corporate partner in our community.
Motion made by Bill Boyd, second by
Second.
Just as a friendly amendment, he said Charter Article 8:B, and it's
Oh,
Charter Article
thank you.
8:15, or
8-15.
-15, excuse me.
Thank you very much, Council Koenig.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. 600. And could I ask, Eileen, that the topic of the plaques be brought up in a future agenda item, please? So we can consider the criteria. I think that's important.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And they really could even be different levels of appreciation plaque too, you know? Let's just do it. Okay. Thank you, Assistant Chief. Presentation of proposed 2018-19 Town Manager Budget. Whew. This is the beginning. Where do you see this, Tom? You'll find out what you signed up for.
Yes, I am.
Actually, to give you a preface, though, we have to give the devil her due. The devil her due. I'm on a roll. Just leave me alone. The way she presents the budget she's made it, I don't want to say simple, she's made it understandable. And I think we've always commented that in the past. We might as well preface this discussion that way. And Peter, I think you'll find it as well, that having been on the selectmen and the town council before Eileen, it was much more complex. It's the same data, but the presentation is so simplified that even I can understand it. So it may seem ominous, and it's really not. So with that, go right ahead. Devil or do. Go ahead, devil.
But this is the first time you've referred to our town manager as the devil.
Yeah, the devil or do. She didn't
But
fight it, though.
You are that, too, but...
I think she was complimented by that, actually. Go right ahead, Eileen.
I think not, but let's just say we are.
I thought you were going to go along with me there. No, okay.
Did Queen of the Dead come from Becky or Chris?
I don't know. I think it was a department head meeting. It was kind of a joint thing.
Wasn't that after we appointed you the head of the cemetery?
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right,
head
the
of
trustee.
cemetery,
That's
yeah.
right.
Trustee
Yeah.
of the cemetery.
Exactly. So I got a new title, but no more money. Just the
Okay.
prestige.
All that extra
Just the
land you're covering,
prestige,
though,
right,
it's, you know.
exactly. So this is the budget presentation. What this is, as you know, is just basically an overview. The budget itself is obviously many, many pages, all different line items for each department, including salaries, benefits, various projects, and that kind of thing. But this is an overview of some of the highlights of the budget that I am proposing to you. You'll see in here that there's quite a bit of what I would refer to as value-added type of projects that you individuals have on the council have expressed an interest in seeing done.
They were just turning the TV on in the back.
What are you doing?
They were just turning the TV on back
All
there.
right. Well, okay. So, so as we know, as it relates to the tax rate, we talk about the general fund, and the general fund is everything that we think of when we think of the town. So the police, the fire, the public works, library, parks and recreation, street lights, solid waste disposal, anything that you can think of except for the wastewater fund primarily, and a new recreation fund that we have. So when we look at how the tax rate works, you take the proposed budget and then you subtract out really quite a significant amount, $8 or $9 million of revenue that you receive from other sources. The primary one of that is the primary other source of non-tax revenue is motor vehicle permit fees, which this year we're estimating at $5.2 million. So again, you take the budget itself and subtract out the money that you receive from other sources, and then you need to go to, there's a couple of other things that you need to do, and then you go to the taxpayers for the balance. So here's some of the increases that we are proposing to revenues, and any increases in revenues decrease the tax rate. So motor vehicle permits are going in from our what we're proposing from $4.9 million last year to $5.2 million this year. And that's what we're seeing, the trend. Tom Kay has always tried to make sure that we keep up with it because the trend continues to go up, and it seems to be tracking that way as well this year. Ambulance revenue, that again, that has been increasing. We have been doing better with collecting on our ambulance fees. I think that's up to $675,000 per year. Interest on basically on the cash that we have on hand. We are slowly increasing that year after year as the interest rates eke up in tiny little increments. And this is basically money that we have on hand, such as the fund balance that we have, and money that is being held. So for instance, you bring in all your tax revenue, and then you spend out the money, and meanwhile in monthly increments, and then meanwhile you can make interest on that, which again goes to reduce the tax rate. And I think that this number is now $150,000.
Yep.
Good for me. Sale of property, we generally don't put too much money into the sale of property number because it's not something that we can necessarily anticipate. It often has to do with tax deeded property that we receive the interest back on. It's not necessarily we receive our taxes on it. So we're not really selling people's property. We're getting our taxes back. And if you sell someone's property as a result of a tax deed situation, they get the balance of whatever they don't owe in taxes. Other revenue, it's just other revenue and miscellaneous. That's awesome. So anyway, other revenue is other revenue. So just excuse me?
That's other revenue for services.
For services. So that would be things like building permits or different kinds of other permits that there's all kinds of different categories of fees and copy fees and things like that. And then miscellaneous is basically a balancing number because there's so many different categories. So also we're seeing we're not going to be getting the Convincer grant this year. So we've taken it out of revenue, and we've also taken it out of expenses, but we wanted to show that, yes.
And I'm curious, so I know that people, other agencies, other functions throughout the state ask for that there, and we send 1 or 2 personnel with it, so we're just going to cease completely doing that?
That, during the budget presentation, the chief will talk about that in more detail, but in my discussions with her, she had hoped to keep the equipment, the device, and rent it out to other communities, or allow, because they feel it's of great value to keep it going, and bring the device around to the other areas of the state, and, as you said, rent our officers as well that do the that know how to use it.
Okay.
So they'd pay for the
So
use.
try to make it a revenue.
Just a
Oh,
revenue.
they'll pay, so you're saying that those other organizations
Towns or-
would pay for our officers
Right,
to be there? Okay, there you
exactly,
go.
yes. So, and we could see how that works out.
Okay.
But I think it's a very valuable thing, especially the students. When students can see just how much damage can happen, and I'm not sure how far. What do they do? 10 miles an hour? 5? Yeah, it's really quite something. This is one of those things that this is something that you choose to do, that it's not up to us to do that. You can express your interest in doing something like using money to offset the fund balance, but until you make the decision, we don't put it in the budget to the extent that you've done it before. So you, in the past couple of years, you've used $300,000 to reduce the tax rate, and so we put in $300,000. Last year, you put in $450,000. So we, in our budget, we only have $300,000, and that, if you were to use this other $150,000 like you did last year, it would represent 4 cents off the tax rate. Okay. Health insurance. Health insurance, we're seeing an increase of 8.5%, which is $282,000 increase. One of the things that we have seen, as you know, we had anticipated that our health insurance would not increase in really large amounts because of the way that we have changed our health insurance and the higher deductibles and that kind of thing. What we're seeing is some of the unions didn't start their new health insurance, nor did they get their raises until January. And so naturally, a lot of them who had procedures that needed to be done, as you would, you'd have them done before the deductibles start. So, and also, it takes a year or two for them to really kind of shake out what our experience is going to be, because they need to hold some. Like if someone has some kind of an operation, they need to hold some in abeyance or in on the side to make sure that will be covered going forward. So $282,000. Again, a small 8.5% increase sounds really large, but other communities around the state again are seeing huge double-digit numbers again on their health insurance. So I congratulate you for taking the initiative to encourage our employees to reduce, and thank the employees for changing our health insurance plan, because it was getting up to be an absolutely ridiculous amount. Again, foresight on your part makes that number a lot lower than it would have been. So short-term disability. This is something that you may or may not agree to. Is this both of them?
Yes.
Okay. So how much is one and how much is the other?
I believe 26,000.
He just made that up.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go with it. So anyway, there's two different components to the short-term disability part. So one part is approximately $12,000, which is just an increase in our regular short-term disability costs. And as many of you know, we've had a lot of that this past year and the year before, a lot of short-term disability issues with all the departments and the personnel. The second component of that makes it $38,000 is to assist the employees who make more money than $700 a week. So, for instance, a person who made more than that would have to use their sick time and vacation time if they needed to be out for a period of time. I just think I found out firsthand how that can really affect the time that you have off. So I'm just suggesting that we kind of even the playing field so that people of all different wage categories get the same amount of percentage of short-term disability to their salaries. And again, you know, as I said, that's something new and something that you'll need to think about and hope that nobody needs it.
When the time comes, one of the questions I'll have is an understanding of how that works. At what point would the short-term disability kick in, and so you would not use any sick or vacation time? That's the kind of specifics that I would personally be looking for,
Okay.
so I would understand.
Okay. So
I'm
it
not
just for simplicity, it's just very simple. What happens is if it's determined that you actually have a short-term disability, which is a certain number of weeks.
26 weeks.
20,
Short-term disability lasts 26 weeks.
no, but if you have an illness that's going to last for
It's accident
Over-
is immediately, sickness is 5 days. You have a 5-day
days.
waiting period, or
and
if you have an accident.
and then
it's
after
immediately.
that, the short-term disability insurance kicks in, where a person gets up to $700 a week, but they don't get it. It goes toward their sick time, so they don't have to use all of their sick time. So in other words, they get a paycheck, and then the short-term disability check goes to the town, and they use that amount of money and determine how much sick time that would reimburse them.
Okay, so it's
Sure.
proportionate. It's
Right,
whatever equality sick time
exactly.
of $700.
Yeah.
It's 70% capped at $700. So if you make more than $1,000 a week, you're capped at $700. So if you make
And then
$1,200.
the other amount would be used up for your sick leave and or
Sick
vacation.
and/or
Yes.
vacation.
Yes.
Peter, you had a question?
Yeah, this is not the same as a workers' comp claim, right?
Completely different, no.
Okay, so this could be, really, there's no review to determine could we lessen it, right? Because it could be illnesses or anything else.
Lessen it, meaning what?
I guess I'm thinking of it in terms of, do we look at what all the claims were over the course of a year and say, is there any way this could be addressed or lessened? But this is not one of those situations, right?
Well, it's just, it's an insurance policy, so, it would be actuarially calculated, and based on the history of what people make, how many people make over $700 a week, for instance, and, you know, what is the actuarial rate of illness and age groups and that kind of thing. And it's been estimated to be approximately $26,000.
Okay, yeah, and I think I really was just kind of going towards the whole, the cause of why the people needed to take short-term disability.
This could be this weekend, you slip on the ice, you fall, you hurt your knee, you hurt your ankle, you're out of work.
Knee replacements.
Knee replacements, hip replacements, heart,
know.
Okay.
things of that sort that are not related to your career.
Gotcha.
Would
Right.
childbirth be in that?
Would what?
Childbirth would be
Yes.
in short-term disability.
Yeah.
And it lasts for what, for 26 weeks, you said?
26
Duration?
Duration is 26 weeks.
Up to 26.
Up to
Up
26.
To whatever the doctor gives the person for,
But that's the benefit is up to 26
Right.
weeks.
Correct.
And then would go into long-term disability?
Yeah, after that, it would go into long-term.
If-
Which the town does not pay for, but employees can pick up a long-term policy on their own through the town.
So the short-term disability the town covers?
Correct.
Right.
And
And-
long-term is on the employee.
And it's to, when you make less than $700 a week,
That
then
covers
you
all of
get 100% of your wages. If you
Right.
make more than that, then proportionately you get a lot less of your paycheck, and
Right.
therefore have to dip into your sick time, which is really not for
What
a long
surprises
time.
me is that it's in place of your sick leave. My previous experience with, not personally, with short-term disability, is that it kicked in after you used up your sick leave. And that's not true in this case.
Well, in the past, particularly in municipalities, people accrued enormous amounts of sick leave.
Right.
So, they would get, the more years you worked there, or if you were in a particular union or something, you get an enormous amount of sick leave in a year.
Right. Which
Here-
you could turn over and build.
Right.
Right.
Here in Merrimack, you get, the non-union people get 10 days a year.
And are they able to accrue?
Yes, they are, up to,
Maxed out at 240 hours, so you're allowed to accrue, and every year you get brought back to 240 hours.
And you get paid for those excess, or you use it or
Yes.
lose it?
You get paid, but it's 50 cents on the dollar.
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
So to give an example, somebody who's been here for 5 years might have 50 days and might have an illness that would take them away from work longer than that. And then they start digging into their vacation time and that kind of thing. So,
Okay. Okay, thank you.
but it's something to consider. It's
Right.
not,
Yep.
it's just a proposal. Overtime in the fire department, I have increased that by $27,000, and that relates a lot to the increase in calls again, more advanced life support calls and continuously increasing. We reduced it last year because of the 4 new firefighters, and we actually have hired them later than we had expected. So there's going to be a training period of time where they can't really go out on their own. This also represents increases in wages. Finley?
Finley?
I was just wondering, Eileen, if you could tell me what the workers' comp as well as the overtime budgets were last year, if you happen to know that.
I don't know them off the top of my head, but I can get them for you.
I can see them in the budget eventually. I didn't know if you had them today.
Well, you probably want to need to combine them, because we do get one bill for workers' compensation. And again, one of the things that happened this particular year is the workers' comp in general is calculated by taking each category of employee, such as police, who would have a higher risk, or an office worker who would have a lower risk, and each one has their own separate category of costs associated with workers' compensation. So then you take all the wages, multiply them times those factors, and then it gets modified based on your own town's experience. So our experience, rather than being at 100%, we're at now it's 0.68 or 0.68%, 68%, 66. And so it gets modified down. It gets decreased from what the 100% would be because of our own experience. So we've had, the experience has been worse as the past year or so. And although not that bad, since we're not at 100%, and also the rates for the state categories went up as well. So, yes, Peter. Nancy?
Oh, sorry. Steve?
And I guess this goes back to, this is actually appropriate for it rather than short-term disability, but, so, do we go back and look at all the injuries that we paid workman's comp for and say to ourselves, what can we do to maybe make it safer or avoid these injuries and stuff like that?
Yes, we have a joint loss safety committee, and somebody from Primex comes here. Who is it? Primex? Yes. They come here and they sit on this committee. We have members of the regular employees, and then the supervisors who are all there, and they investigate. They review everything from fender benders on town vehicles all the way to different kinds of injuries, and they get reviewed as to what we might have done to change that, if not possible, if it wasn't possible. So you can also, during those periods of time, you can see trends like we saw in the fire department last year. We were starting to see more injuries related to lifting and because of extra hours that people were working, and people's weights are increasing. So so they are evaluated by us internally and by the company, because Primex is very forward-thinking. They don't want municipalities that don't participate in this, that don't evaluate this. They want good performers and ones that are always on top of what's going on and how to correct the injuries that are occurring. So, for instance, somebody in the wastewater department fell, and he was out for almost a year. And that was, was that avoidable?
Yeah, it was avoidable.
It was avoidable,
Yeah.
but
We
yeah.
fixed that
We
situation.
We fixed the situation, but again, we also to take care of that beforehand, to be proactive. The committee goes around and reviews each building as well. So are there hazards here? Are there hazards there? They look at the equipment and those kinds of things to make sure. You were never on that committee?
Oh, I remember it all. Sometimes I say it out loud because I think sometimes the public isn't aware. When they see, wow, 44,000 in workers' comp, I think it's good for maybe the public to hear that we don't just fluff it off, that there's a joint loss safety committee, and I'm aware of that, and sometimes, I don't think a lot of people are, and that there is some type of review, and, so.
A lot of review,
Yeah.
as you know.
So sometimes these questions I'm asking are more for.
No, well taken.
And
Okay.
all your questions are welcome.
Now it's Terry or Tom.
Thank you.
You do the same thing after.
So compensated absences, this is a number that needs to be put in it's done by Paul, but approved by the auditors, which is, we need to set aside money every time somebody gets to a certain age where they're able to retire. We have to estimate the amount of money that their payout might be. For sick time or vacation time or that kind of thing. And we need to accrue it in a fund so that if somebody retires, it doesn't bleed some department's budget. So it's set aside and it doesn't affect a budget, an individual budget. So that, as I said, that money accrues, and it's based on retirement eligibility. Okay. Property and liability insurance increased. That's a small amount. I don't remember how much it is, but I think it's probably less than 2%. I just made that up, but okay. All right. Also, as we've been talking about recycling in particular, the tipping fees which are is the cost of disposal of trash at, we have a long-term, very long-term contract. I think we probably have maybe 4 years left on it. It ended up being a 10-year contract, which was very advantageous to the town. We pay a lot less than other communities because we locked in at a good rate. So the tipping fees are going up $1 per ton, and that equates to
$8,500. It's a combined. We
Okay,
combine both
all
of them
right,
together.
all right. So if we'll get you that later, because
It was $8,500.
$8,500, $1 per ton. We do about, we dispose of approximately 8,500 tons of trash a year, and that's fairly consistent.
Paul, you said you combined, what were we talking about? Or is it
Well,
not?
Let me finish that. Okay, do you mind? Sorry. But he's combined the tipping fee increase, which is about $8,500, with a recycling fee that we talked about. So
that's in the 51,000?
it's in the 51,000, yes.
85.
Yeah. So the recycling fee, as you know, as I wrote you a memo about how the recycling cost of disposing and actually taking away of the trash we used to get a small amount of money for it and sold it. And now, as recycling has become more popular and easier to do with single stream recycling and that type of thing, there is a larger and larger amount of that product on the market, which makes it less valuable. So instead of receiving a little bit of money for recycling, it's now costing us $54 a ton. I was asked the question from Tom Kay as to is this now starting to approach what it costs to dispose of regular trash? And the answer is that we're paying $59 a ton.
54.
Yeah.
Regular.
60 what? $61 for the tipping fee for regular trash, 54 for recycling, but recycling actually takes it off the property as well. So if you put it into the regular stream, it costs $63 a ton plus another $60 to transport it out of Merrimack and bring it to the landfill at Turnkey in Concord or in Rochester, Dover. So it costs about $120 to dispose of a ton of trash. If you throw it in your regular trash, it costs $54 a ton if you use it recycling. So there is still a significant
regular
savings.
trash, not recycling.
Right.
It costs $120 per ton to accept and to transport.
Yes.
Total.
Mhm.
Whereas the recycling is 54 because that 54 includes the transporting.
That's exactly
Gotcha.
so. Yeah.
And what was that increase?
It was significant. I think the last time it was maybe $30 a ton.
25.
I don't need tonight, it was more.
It was
Right.
in the 20 to 30.
It wasn't, I just
Jump.
thought it was a jump, but.
Yeah, it was quite a jump, yeah. But again, still very much a savings. We're not really seeing a change in that, an increase, even though recycling is so much easier now. Again, it's pretty much the same, 8,500 tons of regular trash and 1,500 tons of recycling material every year, and it just kind of stays the same. I've increased the legal budget by $25,000. We have one matter with a particular company that is going to be requiring some legal costs, and also, but the majority of it is because we have 5 union contracts coming up, and
God, it just seems like we just did that.
you just did it. I was the one that
we did.
that. So,
Wow.
so anyway, that is brutal. So, anyway, I know, so
It
we're
is
going to spread.
unfortunate.
we're-
It's
we're
just
gonna
naturally.
Yeah, but we're going to
bad.
spread them out.
Yeah.
We will spread them out this next time. But I wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same health insurance was my main goal when we decided to do all 6 in 1 year. So, so anyway, I usually do a lot of this myself, but and with Paul and Sharon's assistance and your guidance. So I'm not sure that we'll need to spend all of that, but you never know. So I'd like to have it available, especially for questions about language that can come back to haunt you later if you don't get them in the exact proper terms. Voting booths, this is something that Tom Kay has mentioned. We really very bad need for new voting booths, and they'll cost approximately $53,000.
Now, how many are that going to purchase? Just, is that a replacement, like half of them? Or?
I believe that replaces the voting booths at the
John Newman?
Upper Elementary School in St. John Newman.
So too large.
And the
'Cause-
reason,
So JMU's,
J
that's a
Muse,
large capacity. Okay.
yeah, JMU's and St. John
It
Newman.
buys a lot,
Yeah.
because they're pretty
'Cause they're middle school.
simplistic.
Okay.
Well, we're talking booths and not the machines, or we're talking the machines as well? The actual machines that gather the ballots and count them up?
The actual machines that count the ballots, we actually purchased 2 at the end of last year, 2 new ones.
Okay.
It's very specific. They have to be approved by
Oh,
the
yeah.
state, and only 2 companies are approved by the state for the voting booths, and 1 company is approved by the state for the ballot boxes. Actually, the company that's approved by the state for the ballot boxes doesn't make those ballot boxes anymore, so, or the machines anymore, so we were lucky enough to get 2 of them at the end of last year. So, but we replaced those 2, so that one that was at St. John Newman that was broken should be recycled out. And
Through a
then-
crusher, I hope.
Yes, and then the voting booths, actually, I believe Diane will have a presentation more, but I believe those are the circular ones, not the,
Oh,
not
Wow.
the rows, it's more of a
Okay.
circular, 8 circular.
gotcha. Okay.
Okay. This is an expensive one, but it's something that's been on the list for improving of the parks, and that is to do quite a bit of work on the Natticook Lake dredging and docks at Wasserman Park. They need a lot of work. They're used a lot by the public and as well as the day camp. You know, as I said, it's an expensive amount of money, but it's one of the things that we have here that are very, very much loved and used. Paving infrastructure, always try and increase that a little bit. It never hurts to have a little bit more money for road improvements. Talking to Kyle the other day, he talked to me. I said to him, you know, what would be the appropriate amount of money to have in the budget for road paving, and he said about $2.1 million.
Sorry.
$2.1 million.
Getting thirsty, sorry.
Yeah. So, so he said approximately $2.1 million would be a good amount of money to have in here. And as I recall last year, Tom M. said that's if you're in Pasadena, California. So we've put in $800,000 into road paving, which is, it's a solid amount of money. And I think we're making some headway. Our roads are a lot better than a lot of communities, and we certainly don't go out and bond them like other communities go out and borrow money to do our roads every 20 years or so. This is a big bite, $150,000 for heating and cooling of Town Hall. It's really necessary because we basically have the old, they're like the old, remember those old cheap hotel room
Yeah.
units that go up against the wall, and they have two settings, high and off? So, so, you know, you keep having to turn them on and off. We've lived with them, which is fine, because we're hardy New Englanders. But this past year, they've started catching on fire. So fire department has had to come. And, yeah, so we do need them. And rather than getting the old units that they don't actually make anymore, we would like to do a HVAC system for town hall, hopefully saving us some money on
The actual
heating and
cost.
cooling as well. But it really, it must be done. We don't want the fire department coming anymore.
Not that we don't love the fire department.
love
but
them.
We don't want them to come put out our buildings.
Put out our building heating
Any
and
more than
cooling
anybody else.
systems, right? Because that probably wouldn't be covered by insurance. So there's one additional election for to add $16,000. Maintenance of vehicles. As the equipment gets more and more sophisticated, and a lot of this we've seen a lot of this has to do with the ladder truck, for instance. The one ladder truck that we have costs an awful lot of money to keep running. It's old, but I don't know how much they are, but I would say they're in the ladder trucks in the neighborhood of $1.5 million. Yes?
They're very close to that.
Yeah. So we have, been using ours and putting money into it every year, but it's less than $1.5 million. So, and it's needed, it's definitely needed, but it's not used a significant amount of time. It's just obviously for buildings of a certain height. So we need to keep that running. And I believe that you will see, as we've been discussing, and Finley knows, that we will probably see that number going down as we start putting some of the highway equipment and dump trucks inside. They will have a longer life when we store them in the new garage. Debt service, that's our bond payments are increasing by $11,000, which is one of the bond payments that's an interest amount that increases a little bit every year until it's gone. Union wages, this includes steps, $413,000. The reason why this includes all the benefits associated with the wage increases, and these were voted on by the people. The steps are higher than expected because we have so many new employees. So in the past, often the steps end at 3 years, or sometimes earlier than that. They're compressed. And when you have new employees, they get steps and cost of living raises. And so at the beginning, it costs you more in steps, but the wages are less. So one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that I would like to, this is a net amount of money, I would like to add the deputy police chief position to the police department again. It's a position that we once had, and we eliminated that position in favor of hiring a prosecutor. We found out that the prosecutor job is very, very important. It takes a lot of the, with the laws being more complicated and seemingly in favor of the criminals more because of all the paperwork and things that are needed. We felt that the prosecutor position was important to have, and it's an attorney's position, actual attorney, and the deputy chief position is important because it is a position that would be a non-union position that would be confidential. Not that the captains acted in any way that wasn't confidential, but it's just an important position, as Councilor Albert spoke about, in terms of chain of command and that kind of thing. Who is the second in command? So it's a very important position to support the police chief. And in looking at that position, in order to maximize or minimize the cost increase, I'm also recommending to eliminate an open position called administrative lieutenant. So to add a deputy police chief position and eliminate the administrative lieutenant is an increase of $21,000. I am proposing, and Diane Trippett will get into this a little bit more, to make a part-time account clerk in the tax collector's office and town clerk's office from part-time to full-time. I'm not sure how many, but I want to say in the past few years they've gone through about 5 part-time people, because and it costs thousands of dollars and hours to train them, and then they go and get a full-time job somewhere else. So it's been kind of a revolving door, and it takes away from, while that person's in training, we're paying them, and we're short a person, and the lines get longer. So she'll be making a presentation about that.
Question?
Yeah.
When she's done this
Oh,
call.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Was it about this, though?
Yeah.
Before
you move
go
on.
I am going to move on, so go
Okay,
ahead.
I just was curious, the 37,000, that is not fully loaded, is it?
It is fully loaded. It's primarily the health insurance and other benefits, because the wages aren't significant, but the health insurance is probably,
Okay,
20,000 of that.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I'm proposing a full-time custodian position. Again, that's not the wage. That's not the wages. It's the wages and benefits. Again, the health insurance is almost, and benefits are probably half of that or more. We have temporarily hired a person to help out here at Town Hall and the police station, that's been working out magnificently. I don't know if you have noticed, but the buildings here had been looking kind of shoddy and not really being kept up particularly well, especially if you just have one person, and there are 2-person jobs that need to be done. So we are currently using a custodian who works part-time, and he's working out really, really well. All the departments are very happy with him and the work that he's been doing and trying to keep our older buildings painted and clean, and doing the different kinds of things that mechanical kind of cleaning and carpentry, minor carpentry kind of things. And
So is this part-time to full-time?
no, this is a full-time person. It wasn't a part-time person. It's somebody that we've been using, though, with some of the money that we've had to get some of these things done, like painting the police department. I think you've seen downstairs, down in the building that I'm in, where those rooms have been painted, and the doors, right, Nancy, and different things like that. And I shouldn't say this, but I will. The person that we have hired to do this is a real find. He's willing to do anything. He can work outside, he can work inside, he can do cleaning, he can, help with parks maintenance and all those kinds of things. And he's just been a fabulous asset to us. Sometimes it's hard to get somebody who works continually for a small amount of money. He's a really hard worker. This is a very important one to me in particular, and to the chief. She'll be proposing something in addition to this, but this is a new position called, which would be a new sergeant position for special investigations in the police department. The $133,000 represents everything: health insurance, workers' comp, retirement, which has now reached almost 30% of the wages. It's a very important position, and I'm sure the council and the chief will be discussing it in great detail in the future. But it has to do with primarily with some real drug issues that we're having in town that we're all very strongly want to put the kibosh to before it starts expanding and becoming a bigger problem. And as I said, the chief and the council will be talking about that publicly, about why this is such an important position. Capital reserve funding has increased by $43,000. This is something that I have been trying to get to move up to a point where it's actually a savings account rather than being a revolving account. And what I mean by that is a capital reserve fund, as we know, is supposed to be, in a very simple form. You need a fire truck or a ambulance for $400,000, so you save $100,000 every year for 4 years, then you buy it. And because of difficult economic times, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, that was a place where it was kind of easy to cut because there had been some savings in there. And so when I first got here, we were only putting about $300,000 in here, but spending $1.5 million out of there, because that's where all the equipment comes from, the trucks, the road, the matches for the bridge programs, and that kind of thing. And now it's at $1.5 million, and we're spending about $1.5 million. So it's not being depleted, but it's still kind of maybe not serving the purpose that it was meant to serve. So here's some reductions. Maintenance of office equipment, $24,000. Maintenance of buildings and grounds, $11,000, because we had some specific projects that we did last year. I think we did the windows. Again, I showed you the Convincer grant came out of the revenues, is coming out of the expenses too. And miscellaneous is just a balancing item. So the total increase of the general fund operating expenses is proposed at $1,586,000. That's expenses, and if you reduce the take the revenues out, it's less than that. So this is something that I think the council is what Nancy was talking about, that seems to be helpful in presenting the budget. We take the total expenditures, and then we take out the capital reserve fund deposits, because that can vary greatly every year, and it can kind of skew the way that you look at the budget. other capital, which are things like, buying police cruisers and the dredging project that we were talking about for Wasserman Park, and there's some of the other ones.
You got $25,000 for your space needs study, but you got minor equipment in fire, you
Okay,
got minor
that's-
equipment in
I'm sorry.
solid waste.
Yeah, so it's those kinds of things that we do outside of the capital reserve fund.
I just want to make an
Expenditures.
explanatory note for Pete and Tom, which was, before we get into the details, there has to be able to separate and understand. Remember that there's going to be a number eventually that will be the amount that needs to be raised by taxes. There's a whole bunch of monies that you're going to see that is not related to tax rate. Okay? For example, the self-supporting funds, we don't raise that, but for example, the sewerage. We have to reflect it in the budget, but we don't charge for that in the tax rate because they pay for it by fees. Capital reserve funds, we have to reflect it in the budget, but we've already saved the money.
That's right.
But we have to reflect it in the budget because we're going to spend it. So just start out, when you start examining it, you have to separate the money that we don't have to raise money for to pay for it, or the money that we have in savings, which is the capital reserves. Okay?
So that's why it's broken out like this, so
Right.
that you'll see the total expenditures. In the first one is the general fund, and when we talk about the general fund, again, that's related to the tax rate. Then you have your self-supporting funds, the $5.9 million for a total of $34 million. The general fund itself is that 26?
28.
Ooh, bad. 28 million. And then we subtract out those things that some of the things that aren't operating expenses. So we take out capital reserve fund deposits, which is basically money that goes into our savings accounts. Then other capital, which are unusual things that we don't do every year. Road infrastructure, it's important for you to see how much, and for the public to see how much money is going into repairing the roads, and we put that separately. Capital reserve fund expenditures, as Nancy says, there's money that's going to come in from our savings account to pay those. So that won't affect the tax rate. Then we go on to the next one, which, this is something that is usually something that you scrutinize to the greatest degree, and that is the operating funds. Once you remove all those other things that we just talked about, equipment and special projects and sewer fund and that kind of thing, we look at operating expenses. If you look at general government, you see that went up $101,000. Some of that has to do with raises. A big amount of money of that has to do with there's $25,000 in there for legal. There's compensated absences, which is a significant amount of money. So you can go through each one of those and see where that is. You can see the police department wage increases and that have already been voted on, the new position, and those kinds of things. So,
And again, just to help with Peter and Tom, and then you may already know this, I don't mean to insult you, but I remember it's just highlighting it because it was something I learned as time went on, is that what you're saying now is just a summary. You will get specifics on what this increase or decrease is when you actually get the budget,
line by line.
line by line.
Yeah.
Okay?
So that is the first one was operating expenses, the blue one, and then we have capital reserve fund deposits, which is basically money that goes into our savings accounts. Those accounts were established by the people to set up these amounts of money for for these various things, and they're very specific. Fire trucks, ambulances, public works equipment, roads and bridges, et cetera. And they've already been set up by the public, and we set aside money each year to pay for them. So it's one of the best things the town of Merrimack does. The town does not issue much in the way of debt, almost no debt, and then saves up and pays in cash for these types of things. I've never seen a town that works so well at doing this. It's one of the really good things, because people don't need to pay interest on bonds on these things. Then other capital, it shows you what we did last year, shows you what other things that we're proposing to do this year to buildings and equipment and that kind of thing. Road infrastructure is on online. You see the $50,000 increase. And so it's back again to the $1.5 million increase in expenses. Then you add in the capital reserve fund expenditures, which again, as Nancy had said, that comes in as revenue, so it doesn't affect the tax rate per se. State and federal grants, that was a big, huge one that we had last year. That was an in and out. We had a big, huge, as you remember, bridge project money and that kind of thing that we had in, that came in and went out. So that gives the impression that that the budget went down a lot, but it really didn't, because we received the money in revenue as well. So so anyway, so in reality, the general fund expenditure increase is proposed to be $1.586 million, with which is a 6.22% increase.
And you just got to remember, we're underneath regulations from the state to gross appropriate, and that's why you see the state and federal grants there and the capital fund expenditure there to come up with the total gross appropriation, because that's how the state wants us to present the finances.
And that's also how the town council wants to do it as well. You have the option to not necessarily do the capital reserve fund expenditures, because you are the agents to expend, but you have chosen to put them in there so that the public can see exactly what's happening.
Right.
So, this is for you to look at your leisure. This shows you what our savings accounts, basically,
Right.
and the activity in the savings accounts that has occurred over the years. So the balance that's estimated based on the increases and then expenditures is expected to be $3.3 million which is very close to what it was last year, 3.184. And I'm just looking at the general fund right now. I didn't include milfoil. So it's proposed we had $3.1 million, $3.2 million in the capital reserve funds. We're proposing to put in $1.7 million and spend $1.5 million. So as you can see, there's not a lot of real savings going on. It kind of goes in and goes out in the same year. But we're working on that. So here's some of the capital reserve fund purchases. I'm going to try and shorten this a little bit. No, not that short. So Finley, is that what you want? You want me to shorten it?
No, I was
Okay.
appreciating Paul's efforts, though.
Oh, well, okay, let's move to the end. I vote we adjourn. No, just briefly, computer equipment. We need a telephone system upgrade here at Town Hall. Once again, the equipment at Town Hall, they don't make it anymore. So we can't even get parts anymore, and that's generally when we know that we need new stuff, is when they don't make the parts for it anymore. So that's proposed to come out of Capital Reserve Fund, $71,000. And then A South Fire Station needs assessment study that would be combined with another 25,000 and 25,000 from the police budget or general government, I'm not sure which one, to look into the feasibility and space needs assessment as we did with the highway garage for a public safety complex. And
that's related to what we discussed at the retreat.
right.
Just
right.
be able to,
Yeah.
where did that come from?
Yes, exactly.
The town council had talked about looking at the feasibility of a combined, because the police station is really
In rough shape.
in rough shape, and it's being outgrown.
Yeah.
And that we also had talked about the fire department, and a lot of communities are talking about a safety complex,
Mm-hmm.
and would that be more cost efficient and all the rest. So just to let the public know, that's where that came from.
Right, thank you. So, so anyway, I'll just let you look at the rest of them yourselves. Those are the proposed expenditures. A lot of equipment, dump trucks that we do every year. There's canoe launch, Severance Bridge canoe launch that we've talked about before. And there's a big expense there for portable radio replacement for the fire department. We've been talking about this for a couple of years. Once again, it's equipment that they no longer make anymore, and we can't get replacement parts for. So, and they're not efficient. So we have to do a whole new replacement of all the radios. Why don't we just move on? Okay, so there's self-supporting funds. As you can see, the most expensive or the highest cost of the self-supporting funds is the wastewater fund, and as Nancy had mentioned, the money for that comes from the sewer user fees. Then you have outside details of the police department. We get money back in the same amount that we spend, with a little bit of money for administration. The library has a small fund. Fire outside details, similar to the police, but they do less of them. The media division, which is here at Town Hall, we get cable franchise fees, and we apply some of that, not all of it. Some of it gets applied to revenue in the general fund, and some of it gets applied to our media division. And the wastewater debt for the upgrades that we've done in the past couple of years. So here's the tax rate proposal. Get to the bottom line. We proposed last year that that the tax, when it was originally done, I believe that we were at somewhere in the 22-cent range, and it ended up being negative 1 cent when all was said and done last year, after you used this additional fund balance and that type of thing and trimmed back the budget. And the proposal this year that I've made is $5.27, which is an increase of 37 cents. As usual, these are the things that could change: rooms and meals tax, highway block grant, and we usually make a proposal for raises for the non-union staff. But I'm not prepared to do that. I'll give you a proposal yet. So again, I think this is very, very important for people to know, and I'm surprised that people aren't more interested in this. But you can see in the blue, that's the part of your tax bill that relates to the town. That relates everything you can think of that relates to the town. Is that 22%? I mean, I believe now it's just under 21%, and here's what your tax bill looks like. So if you had a $260,000 home, which is the average price of a home in Merrimack, the school gets 73.86% of that bill. So of your $5,977 bill, $4,388 goes to the school. $315 goes to the county, and $1,274 goes to the town. Police, fire, trash, roads, this, that, everything else, parks, recreation, everything you can think of, which is kind of astounding to me that that 21% of the tax rate is the town, and I think they're starting to understand that a little bit more. It's I know it's somewhat frustrating to me, and I imagine it is to you, that when people get frustrated with their tax bill and the size of the tax bill, they look at the town. And you can see that, like for instance, last year, the tax rate went up 58 cents. The county went up 1 cent, the town went down 1 cent, and the school went up 58 cents.
Is there such a table, and it probably doesn't mean anything except for curiosity. It doesn't mean anything except for curiosity. Is there a table that reflects the various towns of our comparable size and what the proportion is? Is there such a table?
I would imagine that
I'm
there
just
were.
Curious.
And I can tell you from my own experience from 3 cities. In a city government, the city council votes on the bottom line of the school budget,
Right.
and the proportionality has always been in the 45% to 55%. So the city would get 45%, and the school would get 55%. That's in 2 of the cities that I worked for, and also the tax bill that I paid in Nashua, same thing, it's a city.
But if you had comparable towns like Londonderry.
And Hampton, for instance,
Yeah.
it's the same proportionality. It's about...
Is that a city or is that a town?
It's a town,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes, we can get that information for you.
I'm just curious as to the distribution.
It might be a year or 2 old, but we can get it from DRA.
Cities are difficult to compare because
Exactly.
city budgets, the maintenance of facilities, the transportation, all those, well, I'm speaking loosely to it because I don't know the detail, but those things are associated with this city budget as opposed to the school budget, which is more the education. And
Isolate, right.
so so that's not a good comparison. Londonderry to Merrimack would be better. Derry,
Salem, whatever.
yeah.
I'm just curious to see how, it may be that we are reflective and comparable, but I don't know. Yes.
In my experience with the cities that I'm talking about, I know them. I know the budgets obviously intimately, and they don't include transport. The city doesn't pay for the transportation.
Yeah, Nashville, Manchester
It's-
do.
Maybe they do, but like in the cities that I've worked in, the school paid for school-related things, and the town paid for town-related
Right.
things, just like we do here in Merrimack.
Interesting. Okay, questions? Any? Pete?
I guess I'd be interested in, as we go along, numbers on how much it would cost to offset the budget using some of the unfunded, unreserved fund, thank you. Kind of to see what numbers would help us as we go. That would be something I'd be interested in if that could.
Yes, Paul?
Just so everybody understands, it's about $30,000 for 1 cent on the tax rate. So if you increase appropriations by $30,000, you're going to go up about 1 cent. If you decrease appropriations or revenues by $30,000, you'll go down 1 cent.
So that 30,000 is plus or minus 1 cent.
1 cent.
So, okay, so there you go. Okay.
And, I think that might be a very interesting discussion to have too, because, as you know, at our retreat, it certainly wasn't decided or anything, but it was discussed about maybe using some of the fund balance to pay for public safety, or partially pay for a public safety complex or something like that for a one-time expense. But when you start getting, as we've talked about before, the fund balance, if you think of it as a finite kind of a number, you keep using $450,000 a year, eventually you depend on it, and then the tax rate automatically goes up when you don't have it to use anymore. So, and, I think that you've done a good job in taking decent-sized chunks out of the fund balance to reduce the tax burden over the past several years. But it certainly deserves further discussion.
Finley?
I would like, when it comes time, when we start discussing the new HVAC system for Town Hall complex, I'd like, whomever might be putting that together, I would be interested in the comparisons as far as better efficiencies, what kind of savings I might anticipate, because that would go a long way in helping me swallow that bitter pill, I guess. Thanks.
We'll present that in our building and grounds discussion, which I believe is the second group of meetings that we have in the tax. We start with fire and police, and then I believe building, DPW, welfare is the second group. So that we'll be able to discuss that at that time. We'll have it for you.
Great. Thank you. And also, I wasn't rushing your meeting. I'm just freezing in here tonight. I don't know if it's just me. And she's, yeah.
I'm just perfectly
I asked her, I said, is it
happy.
cold? She says, no, it's very warm.
It's
So-
pretty warm over here if you guys want to switch.
That's because you're on the hot seat.
I'm free. I would put my
That
coat
was
on.
pretty good. You have to admit that. Okay. Did you have
Yeah,
a
you're
question,
welcome.
Tom?
Yeah, no, thank you for, like Nancy was saying, this, how you laid this out is, to understand it, which is very nice. So thank you for that, because it's going to make it so much easier to go through this budget and understand it, so thank you.
It doesn't solve the enormous book you're going to get and the details, but at least you're a jumping off point of understanding. It always helped me.
He just wanted a floppy drive, a USB.
Oh, he's good. Not me. I need the hard copy. Any other questions? Seeing none. Okay, I guess you're off the hot seat actually now.
Thank you.
Everybody has their schedule for the budgets, meetings, and all the rest?
No.
Yes, you
Refuse to
do.
look at it.
You refuse to look at it. I already put it.
You'll
my-
get them again
I already
tonight.
put it on my phone calendar. Okay. Consideration of changes, next item, to chapters of Merrimack Town Code, first reading. Again, we have to do this one at a time, apparently. Town Council to consider the acceptance of the recommended changes to chapter. Let's start with 34, which is the library. Most of these, as you noticed, are literally one-page kinds of things, so
No changes from previous years of the
no
library.
changes. Could I have, are there any questions? If not, I'd accept
Madam
the
Chair, move
motion.
Chapter 34 to a public hearing.
Motion made by Bill Boyd, second by Peter Albert. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? Tom?
No,
Yes.
I don't oppose, yes.
Okay, 600. Okay, Chapter 66, which is miscellaneous duties of the town council. The important thing to note is out of this 6 articles, 5 of them have been superseded. So there's only one article left, so I purposely looked at that and said, oh, it's the town council. Oh, it really is nothing, isn't it? So anyway,
That's the only thing that I was going to say. You hit it on the nail on the head.
okay, so I accept the motion.
Madam Chair, move Chapter 66 to a public hearing.
Bill Boyd, second by Finley Rothaus. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. 600. Okay, Chapter 92, which is amusement devices. And as you noted, Kristen Warner Wardner submitted some information about that, having to do with language.
There's one change in this, it's chapter number 9, which talks about location restrictions about minors, and she believed that the old language was kind of unconstitutional, so she's recommended this current language. Basically, that says that no person under the age of 16 will be allowed to use an amusement device without consent, without a parent or a guardian.
Any questions about that revision?
Yeah, I did.
Tom.
When I read through the original wording, it sounded like it was trying to suggest that people can't put the amusement devices in back rooms that would be hidden from the public view, and therefore it would be conducive to illegal gambling or something like that. And that seems to have been totally thrown out by our attorney in only talking about people 16 years of age or older. Did I misread that original, or do we not really care about
The way
where they're
the
placed?
attorney took this is basically on the first sentence. It talked about 500 feet near a school, church, youth activity center.
Yeah.
So they didn't want the amusement devices in those locations, that the kids would be going in there and playing them without an adult supervision. That's the way she understood it. Now,
I think that second sentence is totally separate.
Yeah, the second sentence was totally separate. And if reading this, we could keep that second sentence and just put it at the end of the new language that she put in.
But is that something that would really concern us, or would the state be more concerned about that? Because I don't know that I really care about placement.
Well,
If you consider the discussion that was had earlier this evening and various things going on in town and whatnot, I think we would be concerned about amusement devices behind steel doors with little windows where you have to give the password to get in or something like that.
Is that in violation of state law, though? Because again,
Well, I don't know. Our police would have to deal with it.
a couple of years ago, we had the situation where there was an illegal gambling ring in Merrimack, and the devices weren't in plain sight, and they walked into the establishment and found them. So if we could leave that sentence in there, I'll defer to Councilor Albert, who has much more knowledge on the legality of
Go ahead, Peter.
placements.
Come back a page.
It's been my experience that the illegal gambling devices, these guys keep them right up on the counters, the card machines and everything else, not in any back room. And you see them regularly in bars and different places, and they're right there. There's just a.
Which is what this thing says you have to do. Mm-hmm. Currently, it says you have to do it, and we're striking that at the moment. And I'm just wondering if we shouldn't leave that line in there saying you do have to keep it out in the open.
Yeah, I don't see why it would hurt it. So I agree with you. I think we should leave
Keep
it out
that
there. And
sentence.
keep it in there.
Yeah, we'll keep that in.
So, if I'm hearing correctly, location restrictions would be kept in. It's crossed off at the moment, right?
Mhm. Operations by
And
minors.
a prohibited exception would be maintained, so it'd be
Maybe that can be
added
put in
to
as a new
new-
92.9A
Yeah,
or something, or
We'll
you have
keep,
to
add
reword,
2 of
renumber
them.
everything.
We can add 2 of them. We'll renumber them.
Okay.
We'll
so
renumber.
no license shall be issued for operation of amusement device within 500 feet of any school, church, or youth activity center.
That would be stricken.
That would be stricken, but it would be, okay, the second sentence, all amusement devices shall be kept, that one is going to be kept. And that would be under location restrictions.
Yeah.
Then there would be another article, Paul, if I'm understanding correctly, operation by minors prohibited exception, which would have the sentence added by the attorney, no person shall permit a person under 16 years of age to play or operate. Is that,
Correct.
do we understand it that way? Yes? Okay.
That works for me.
We can move that.
Thank you.
So we'd have to be able to have a motion to move it with those corrections?
Madam Chair, I would move Chapter 92 to a public hearing with the appropriate amendments.
Excellent. Motion by Bill Boyd, second by
Second.
Tom Koenig, if I heard it correctly. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. 600. Okay, Chapter 145, peddling and soliciting.
At this time, there are no changes.
So we're allowing biking in town, or? Oh,
Lowry, what was it? I didn't hear you. Oh,
there is a slight change, changing the chief of police to the police chief,
And
to
that's,
be consistent with previous
right.
changes
gonna-
we've been making.
I want to just jump in here, and I think
Yes, Peter.
maybe we need to research this, only because the city of Manchester just got successfully sued by a panhandler. And that might be something we might want to look at as far as, or at least consider, as far as banning panhandling, as much as sometimes, I won't even go off on that whole thing, but, might want to look at it. I'm not saying it, it's just something we might want to review with our, because of that recent decision.
So should we have our attorney review this in light of the recent?
I want to say that this individual that they took legal action against won something in effect of $95,000.
Yeah.
So,
It was around that amount of money, yeah.
just hit the lottery.
Okay,
yes, we did.
There's a lot of folks up in Manchester panhandling these days.
Well, the canning and all that other stuff would go out the window, because if
The
you're,
boot drive,
Hmm?
the fire boot drive.
Yeah, but none of that could be prevented. We don't prevent the boot drive, but I'm just saying that you couldn't prevent anybody. You wouldn't be able to prevent it if a person can panhandle. By apparently this lawsuit, it might indicate that. I don't know. I don't know anything about that, but you couldn't stop anybody from asking for money, any organization or anything.
My experience with the boot drive has always been on private property.
No, it's been in the middle of the
No.
road.
Oh, really?
middle of the road, yeah. The
I haven't
fire,
seen-
yeah.
I've never
The-
seen that.
Oh, yeah,
What?
at the
What is
lights.
Continental.
The fire department that
They
has
do a
the boot
fundraiser
drive
annually.
for muscular
Fundraiser.
dystrophy and
Yeah,
stuff.
basically the law says you can't step off the islands.
Right, they
into
stand on the
into
islands.
traffic. So
Right.
that's really one of the things that you get that individual, like when they do the car washes and everything, it's a safety issue as well,
Right.
Oh,
obviously.
yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah,
that's
they
the,
stand there with the boot. yeah.
Councilor Albert brings up a great point. If you drive along Continental Boulevard, I can't talk tonight, I'm sorry. If you drive Amherst Road, Continental Boulevard on a Saturday, you have a lot of the kids that are
Right.
jumping in between cars, and, guys want to give donations and things of that sort. And you're not supposed to step off the curb,
But
but
that's a safety
it's
thing.
just, they do it, and in that area, we would have to, if we're gonna investigate this panhandling issue with this, we should also look at that area of town, because that is a significant safety risk that has been brought to our attention. But we'd have to look at who owns those islands.
But we've had panhandlers at exit 11.
yep. And just,
And the only discussion has been safety.
Yeah.
They can't get on the road with.
Which I think is what you're probably limited to.
Right.
I don't know. I hate making big deals out of something that really, if the kids get in the middle of the road, the PD should say something to them, I'm sure,
Yeah.
and deal with it. But to prevent those kind of things, it becomes more of a headache for me than I'd rather deal with.
I think state law
Right.
deals with that
I
as a violation infraction, so I'm not suggesting, if I'm reading it wrong, that we
Yeah, no.
put it in, okay.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just saying that to try, but if we're gonna start digging into this, it could become a bit more of a headache.
I just don't want to put us in a position somewhere down the road.
So we
I'm
have to
curious if the
find
laws-
out at whether panhandling, can we say it's unlawful? That's your question. I think I don't know, what's the
Right,
group
we can
think?
say anything we want. The question at that situation, I think, was the way Manchester Police handled the situation.
Oh.
I don't think it was so much having a law that says it's not legal, it's,
Yeah,
dragged
well,
them
that's,
away
I
or
guess
something
that's
like
what
that,
they
or-
based it upon, and they
well,
decided to move on it. I mean, they had a law in effect, they decided to move on it, and again, I didn't read the decision, but It was based upon that by their doing so. It wasn't like an unlawful use of force or something to that effect. It was them outlawing panhandling.
Which
It
is
was-
what this does.
Yeah, which was the gist I got, so, you know.
Okay, I read it slightly separately. I thought it was the way they handled it, not necessarily the fact that they handled it, but
Yeah, I mean, I'll look into it. I just thought
can't
maybe we
read lips.
just put a pause on it for a little bit to see, so,
What I was just whispering that,
I mean,
couldn't read my lips, is that I could bring this forward to the
we can
attorney.
pull up that,
We can move this to the public hearing. And
We'll
at
have,
that
hear from
time,
the attorney.
yeah,
and we'll have our attorney opinion on that, and
Perfect.
if we have to change some stuff, we'll do it at that point.
Perfect.
When do these all have to be, what is our deadline for this stuff?
Like, I think if we finish up in February.
Yeah, so
Okay,
we're coming
so we
close.
can-
We
yeah,
got some
we got a
time,
little bit.
we got some time.
a lot of
So-
these decisions too, you look at, and they're pretty self-explanatory, where you don't need 9 lawyers looking at them. Some of them you do, but some you don't.
So we could pass this on to public hearing with the understanding, or part of the motion should be, and we'll have the results of an attorney review at that public hearing. How's that? Motion?
Madam Chair, I move Chapter 145 to a public hearing, subject to attorney review.
Perfect. Second? Second. Tom Thornton, TT, TK and TT. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, any opposed, none, 600. Okay, and the last chapter is 180, which is temporary sales, locations and vendors. Again, we have a memo from Christian Warner, who was the one who actually gives out these permits. Paul?
Yeah, basically, over the last couple of years, there's been some vendors that have come in, and what Christian asked Carrie Ann to do is to review it, and there are a couple changes. In 183, license requirements exceptions, add item number 3, which gives the license exception to itinerant vendors who operate a business in the state. This language is taken from RSA 321:3, 4. I can see no reason why it should be omitted. And then 186, application of license information required. Basically, what they're saying is that under item H, we would allow vendors at the event to have criminal background requirements waived. There are a couple reasons why we're proposing this. First, it removes a layer of redundancy. Vendors are already under the umbrella of the event sponsor and the property owner. Next, for many events, we have found that it costs prohibitive for vendors, therefore making it difficult for small event sponsors to attract vendors. It would not provide any loss of income to the town because criminal records are obtained through the state. So we're still going to get our fee. It's just the added layer that we've been pushing these people forward to the state. The Chief Roy and Captain Dudash are in agreement with this change. And then 187, expiration of license. Change annual license expiration date from December 31st to 1 year from date of approval. The way it is currently unfairly punishes those who have events later in the year, like the Corvette show and the Mustang shows down at Anheuser-Busch in the fall. Means that if they have another event in January, they gotta come back.
Right.
So we double dips on them.
Okay, are there any questions
I
related to
think
the
some very good
suggestion?
changes, very common sense, some thought Kristen put into it, so she
Yeah.
should be commended. This is good.
Oh, Tom, sorry.
Hi, thank you. There were a couple of technical adjustments I wanted to offer. In 180-6I, the first line reads, "A completed motor vehicle record dated within the last parentheses 6, provided by the applicant in writing." So I don't know if it's 6 days, 6 months, 6 weeks, or 6 years.
6 months. It's supposed to be 6 months.
Months. Oh, okay. I put days down here with a question mark, so I'm glad I asked.
So should it be
So it
parentheses
should
without?
say last 6 months.
Last 6 months provided, no parentheses around the 6.
And the 6 shouldn't be, I mean, it should be written out 6, and then the 6 can be in parentheses.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And also, further down at the bottom of that page, under annual licenses, the addition is 1 year from the date of approval unless an earlier exception date was established, and I thought that probably should say an earlier expiration date was established. I'm not sure what an exception date is.
That sounds correct, Paul, unless you know otherwise.
No, the only thing I could think of there, it would be,
Oh, you might.
You need to push your,
gotta talk into it. The only thing I can think there is that there was an exception given to an event. And,
But, so it would be 1 year from the date of approval unless an earlier expiration date has been given.
right,
So it
It should
expires
be-
in
it should
9
be,
months or
yeah.
something instead of 20.
Expiration,
12.
not-
yeah,
exception.
expiration, yep.
and you can check with Karen to make sure that that's a correct interpretation.
Karen?
I'm sorry,
Carrie?
Kristen. Not
Kristen.
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 We know.
That's the only changes I had.
I understand.
Didn't know who you were talking about.
I know, neither did I. So you can check with Kristen, and if it's not that, if it's something different, then you'll
Right.
have it back to us, okay?
Correct.
Okay, motion.
Madam Chair, move Chapter 180 to a public hearing, subject to the technical changes offered by Councilor Koenig.
Motion made by Bill Boyd, second by Tom Thornton. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
600. Okay, next item. We're getting by that town code. It's a major event. Finally getting that damn thing done. Okay, first quarter financial review, Paul McKelly. Yeah, I know, that's all right. The public have heard worse. And no one's listening at this point anyway. We would have put them to sleep already.
What, they're not riveted to hear me speak about the financials?
We are, Paul. We absolutely. Without a doubt. Maybe with a small.
With bated breath.
Bated breath. I'm glad somebody has bated breath.
Put your coat on if you're cold.
Tomorrow coat? I've got one over here. Very lightweight.
While this warms up, I just want to state that the town is in very good financial state through the first quarter. And actually, we're almost through the second quarter now. We have sufficient appropriations, and our revenues, as you'll see in a minute, are definitely coming in higher than expected. So the first one I'd like to talk about is the health insurance. And as you can see, the overall cost to the town has decreased from 2016-17 to 17-18 in health insurance by about $20,000. Those are some of the changes that have been made through the changing of the insurance. Also in 2016-17, we had several openings. So that's why that gap isn't wider. We had a bunch of openings in fire in other departments last fiscal year, the first quarter. So, New Hampshire retirement cost.
I guess I'm a little thrown off because in the budget presentation, it looks like what you've told us here is basically you've told us it's decreased, but in the budget presentation, an increase in health insurance, 8.5%, was what we were told.
And that is for 18-19.
Yeah, this
Next
is
fiscal year?
This
I'm
is
sorry,
still the-
thank you.
No
My
problem.
mistake.
It's
That's a rookie mistake. Don't worry about
Thank you,
it.
I'm going back, all right.
and I do want
Like
to say
we would
it's
know,
kind
right?
of it's
All
You
it's
can
gonna
get
be-
away with that for a while.
It's
Don't
going to
worry
be
about it.
confusing because we're talking about the first quarter, and you just heard about next fiscal year, what we're presenting for the budget.
See, when it happens to an experienced person like me, it's pitiful. But not when it's a newbie, so don't worry about it. And I do that all the time.
I got called out last meeting, so.
I appreciate.
And I wasn't here last meeting.
I appreciate you all handling my gaffe very sensitively, thank you.
I tried to help you.
The New Hampshire
Water
retirement
sensitivity training page.
comparison from 17,
You're asking
18.
for sensitivity from this group at this hour? No way. I'm sorry, Paul, go ahead.
No problem. Is down from the quarter for about $60,000. As you'll see, the police have a big drop-off in the New Hampshire retirement, and that's due to the number of openings that they have had through the first quarter of this fiscal year.
What are you looking at, Paul? Because I'm missing it too.
Why are your charts never in line with the charts in our booklet? This is absurd.
Yeah.
Sorry,
It's just not,
my bad.
what you're looking at
We don't
is
have
not
that
the,
in our packet.
no.
I see that. No. I'm sorry. That was probably
Turn around and
What's funny is I'm looking at it, I'm going, that's a decrease?
See,
if you look at the chart on the screen,
now
it's a
that we've all
decrease.
diverted the attention to Paul, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, the
If
health
you look at
and
the screen.
the New Hampshire retirement is down, and it shows we're down by about $60,000. And the big reason for that is we've had several openings both in fire and in police. In fire, we have filled 8 positions in the second quarter of this fiscal year.
Right.
And in police, we've just filled 2 positions of the 3 that we have vacant in the second quarter of this fiscal year. So we have some savings in salaries. Hence, retirement, when you're pushing, retirement is 30% of somebody's salary for police and fire. Hence, the reason why some of the savings.
How many people this year have we hired in the police and fire? If you don't know it, don't worry about it.
I can tell you this for a fact, we've hired 9 firefighters. And in the police department, we have
Quite a few.
one of the female officers just graduated from the academy last
Right.
Friday.
Right.
We just hired 2 more gentlemen
Right.
who just started Monday of last week, and they'll be going to the police academy in January. We have one other police officer that I believe we have in the background check process that will be going to the police academy in April. So we have tried to bring the police officers in so that they're not sitting around. If they're not certified by the state, they really
Doing anything.
can't do much except ride in the police car. So we've tried to bring them in as close to when they're going to be going to the police academy on that.
And- Oh, I'm sorry.
And prior
And
to that-
I'll speak to that a little bit, because it's been my experience that it's usually 2 to 3 weeks before, and what they do is they begin to train and educate at the station these individuals. So some of them, they want to be police officers, they had the basic schooling, but it's kind of a prep for the academy, which I think is good and makes them better at what they do and how they perform.
And I will say this, the Human Resource Department in the town for the first quarter and through today has been busy. I see the advertisements for the advertising of the positions, and we have advertised more positions in these first 2 months in any fiscal year than I've been here for the last 13 years.
Well, even, in
So-
the police department, how many young faces are there?
Plenty.
A lot. And it might not be within this fiscal
It's
year.
good, it's a good thing.
It is good, but they look like babies.
So
Thank God.
also with
They wouldn't want older people like us. Go ahead.
also that helps.
We're losing it.
I'm
I'm
trying to get
losing
Finley. I'm trying to get Finley out of here so he can warm up.
And I'll be quiet. Go ahead.
Also with the retirement, our overtime numbers are lower in the fire department and in they're higher in police department, but overall for the town, we're about $25,000 less in overtime in the first quarter. Fire during the first quarter of last fiscal year compared to this fiscal year, we were covering a lot of the shifts with
That's right.
workers' comp and short-term disability, so we had to cover a lot of those shifts with overtime. The police department, because of the shortages, we have to cover their shifts this
Yeah.
first quarter with overtime, so their overtime numbers are higher. And, but overall, as a town, as for the general fund, the overtime numbers are about $25,000 less. Revenue, now the good news.
Nancy?
I'm sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Paul, and again, new counselor, just a quick explanation. What's the time frame on on the quarter.
Okay. We have 4 quarters in the fiscal year. Our fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th.
Okay.
So the first quarter runs from July 1st through September 30th. The second quarter, which we're in right now, runs from October 1st to December 31st. The third quarter is January 1st through March 31st, and the fourth quarter is April 1st through June 30th. So right now, we got 10 days and 10 more days, and the second quarter is over, and you'll be hearing about this in January again, so.
So when we look at quarter 2 and 3 and with the highway department, because of the snow, we'll see that graph go up, I would imagine.
It depends, to be perfectly honest with you, because we do quarter over quarter. So we'll look at what happened last year at this time, at the same time. You know, a couple years ago, we had the October storm, and then we didn't have snow again. Last year, we didn't have an October storm, but we had storms in December. This year, we had the one storm, and then this storm that's coming in tomorrow into Saturday, which probably will be a very labor-intensive storm, so our overtime numbers will be up a little bit. It all depends when the storms hit, too. If the storms hit during the week, it's a little less than overtime, but if they hit on the weekends, it's definitely 100% overtime. So it all depends when the storms are hitting and the trends, but it's quarter to quarter, and the number of storms that we have had. And
Compared to the previous same quarter.
Same quarter, yeah. So when I'm talking about quarters, I'm talking about the first quarter of 2008-9 would be July 1st through June 3rd, July 1st through September 30th. Like I said, the good news, interest is extremely high compared to
Extremely, what it,
you know,
1%?
you got to get excited when you're going back almost 10 years and you're hitting those numbers. The Fed finally moved off the 0 and 25 basis points.
Right.
So quarter percent. They raised it a little bit. It was funny because just yesterday we had this conversation, myself and my deputy, and we sent out emails to all the banks saying, "Hey, the Fed moved. What are you going to do for us?" And I had one bank come back and ask for more money, and I said, "No, I don't think so. You know, I got other banks that are offering me a lot more money than what you're offering." So, you know, they all want more money, but, you know, so we're looking at raising our interest rates, but right now we're almost $100,000 more from last year to this year.
It's really interesting to listen to you talk excitedly about getting higher interest rates, because when you go back home, you talk to your spouse and you realize that you're paying those higher interest rates. And so it's kind of a wash.
Yeah, and you know, I hate to say this, but with the Fed moving that interest rate just that 0.25%, the bond rates are going to be just that little bit higher.
Right.
Because now you're competing
You're
with
going to pay that.
the bank. So we're going to pay it. We're going to pay it on the bond versus, but the bond rates are still what you can borrow money for now is.
Is that bond rate that for the garage set?
Yeah, we have a guaranteed maximum.
Ah, there we go.
So we locked in a guaranteed maximum on it. So building permits are down a little, and auto registrations continue to climb.
That's amazing.
We're $70,000 more this first quarter than last fiscal year. I kind of see that leveling off because, once again, better interest rate. Now it's not free money to the cars, and they gotta, you know, they gotta float their loans and their fees and things of that sort. So those costs are going to be passed on to the consumers, and the interest in a 5-year loan, 6-year loans, things of that sort will go up also. However, I am confident. We talked about $5.2 million. I am confident that $5.2 million should not be a problem. But we'll keep a close eye on it. If it slacks off in the January through March quarter, definitely be looking at that. And that's one thing. We do look at these things monthly, weekly. I look at it weekly, you know, sometimes 2-3 times a week to see where we're at, especially with the car loans. But all the deposits come through my department, so we kind of see them in advance to see how we're doing with the tax collector and things of that sort. So,
Okay.
once again, the town is in good financial shape. On a side note, we had the auditors back in this week to finish up the rest of our 2017 audit. To get that accomplished, we should be getting our report probably mid to late January. I will be bringing forward a policy on one policy recommendation. And we already have the policy. They asked if we could change it to update the language, talking about fund balance and not unreserved and things of that sort. So I'll be bringing that forward probably in January or February, depending on how time permits with it. But we have sufficient appropriations. We have good revenues right now. However, it's the first quarter, second quarter, and we do keep an eye on it. And if things change, I'm sure you'll be the third person to know. It'll be me, then the town manager, and then I'm sure we'll be notifying the town council right away if we have issues or warning points like we have in the past.
Excellent. Any questions? No.
Can I have
Oh, Finley?
No, I just wanted to know if I might have that retirement system comparison, if you have it right there.
I did.
Okay. Do you want to wait until?
And
No.
just,
you-
I don't.
If I could just have
Finley,
one-
I don't
Yes,
have it
John.
right here.
Okay.
I
like
can
Paul
send
was
it to you.
suggesting,
It's not that important.
the auto registrations we have to watch very carefully. It tends to be a leading indicator of the economy. And if the economy's going to go down, we're going to start seeing that in the auto registrations. And we need to react to that quickly. But when it's going up, we also see it going up, and we need to, which is why I've been, for the past 3 or 4 years, encouraging you to add even more in, because we've seen it going up. But I believe that in the next couple of years, it's somewhere down there, it's going to flatten off and tail off, and we can't be expecting raises all the time. But
Right.
so I definitely encourage you to continue to watch that carefully.
Yeah, and it's based on earlier, when I first started, we had big amounts in interest in auto registrations, and we hit a wall pretty quick, and
Right.
we had to find, appropriations, which we did. But we had to find appropriation savings to help offset those, so we're cautious, cautionary.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions before we move on? Okay, let's do the minutes of December 7th.
Madam Chair, I move the Thursday, December 7th, 2017 minutes with one correction.
All ears.
Page 4, line 46. The gentleman's name is Wilfram, Wilfram. His middle name is Vaughn, small letters, VON. And the last name is Sean, SCHOEN.
Yep.
Other than that, that's all I had.
Finley?
It said at the very first paragraph, line 3, it said that I was here and called the meeting to order, and then on line 6, it said that I was excused.
Well, you're special.
So I'm not sure
Were you here or not?
who wasn't here. Jackie wasn't here, was she?
Because the Vice Chair Rothaus and Town Manager
So
were
it would be
excused.
Chairman Harrington.
The chair was not here.
Yes.
So it should have been the chair that was excused.
Oh, that's right.
That
I
would be
wasn't
you.
there.
Though, Finley, I wouldn't put it past you that you did excuse yourself.
No, the
Seriously, I
date,
wouldn't
I
put it
likely
past you.
did.
the date totally.
I did try.
The date totally so. And Harrington, Chair and Harrington was not present, yes. Never mind. I really wasn't there. Or here presently, it sounds like. Okay, so, yes, Tom?
On page 13, line 38, the line says, Director Fox responded, the problem is not having enough full-time staff. There needs to be some punctuation in there. The problem is not having, not is not having. So
The problem is, comma.
problem is, comma, not having enough full-time staff.
Yeah.
Would probably do it.
I agree.
So just a comma between is and not on line 38.
Okay. Problem is, comma, not having enough.
Very good.
Yep. Any other? Okay, motion by Bill Boyd with corrections, second by,
I'll second.
oh, we are going to town tonight, Tom Thornton. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm going to abstain, obviously, since I wasn't here. So it's 5-0-1, Nancy Harrington abstaining. Okay, comments from the press, none present. Comments from the public, none present. Comments from the council? Bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just got two things. First off, I hope the council would join me in offering our condolences to the Halverson family who lost their son Saturday night on the Turnpike, and it was devastating to lose a young child beginning in his prime, especially during the holiday season. I know it's going to be very difficult for them. So I hope my colleagues join me in outreaching to them and offering our sincerest condolences, our prayers, and our thoughts are with you, as I trust the remainder of the entire community are with them during this time. It's difficult and it's painful, and can only begin to imagine the profound depth of their sorrow. So, the second piece was last night, the NRPC, National Regional Planning Commission, met. One of the things on the agenda was approval of amendment number 3 to the Nashville Metropolitan Area 2017-2020 Transportation Improvement Program. And one of the things that was brought to my attention was two things. The overhead tolling plaza, they were planning on beginning construction in 2018. They have now bumped it up to 2019. And the cost has increased from $10.1 million to $17.1 million. And the amendment note that was made to me, and they could not answer my question, and I'm waiting for an answer to my question, was that the rehabilitation required is greater than expected, which begged the question, what at the toll plaza needs to be rehabilitated, because it's pretty much a brand new structure. So I'm waiting for a particular question on that. But this was the second one. This got my goat. This really got my goat. The widening of the Effie Everett Turnpike was scheduled to begin. Obviously, they're doing their engineering phases. They had to redo their estimates. So originally they had projected $81.9 million for the widening of the Everett. Well, after doing their field survey and doing the engineering work, they've discovered that culverts along the particular place need to be upgraded to bridges, and that the bridges that were already out there need to be reconstructed. So now they're looking at a new overall cost of $153.5 million. It went up by close to 100%. So I revisited, and I'm probably the only one, but back when they came here presenting to us, I want to say about 9 months ago, a year ago, I had argued relatively unsuccessfully that you ought to move to 4 lanes. And they kept on saying they don't have the land there. Well, now if they're upping their estimates by close to 100%, they almost, if you're talking about doing some major re-engineering of both, culverts to bridges and looking at existing bridges to new bridges, that they ought to revisit widening the entire road to go to 4 lanes. So I have not had the opportunity, but I'm going to send an email to Eileen expressing these particular concerns and asking her to outreach to Kyle and Dawn to, when they sit down with TTAC at the NRPC, to have that conversation to see if whether or not, if they're going to go back and give us these kinds of numbers, then they ought to really revisit the entire design and have a serious conversation about that stretch of road. If you're only talking about $1 or $2 million, I don't think I would have been pushing the issue. But 153.5.
What was it just recently? Didn't Sununu, it may not be the same thing, but the transportation plan.
But that's with the toll increase. So
Right, and was that what you were going to talk about, Paul?
That, but I
Go
was
ahead.
going to ask Councilor
Go ahead,
Boyd,
you do that first.
did those extra costs include the back end of Concord that they put on the the transportation alternative, the transportation plan with the toll increase.
So the back end of Concord is included?
Now, which it wasn't before.
Right, my
Which is all bridges.
Right, but now they're adding, they're talking about the Bow to Concord, the Bow and Concord projects? 'Cause they were
What's it,
gonna-
exit 12, 13, 14, 15, and that,
So
15?
they were basically adding that, basically, my understanding, and I could be wrong, but my understanding was those stretches of road were going to be bought by the Turnpike. And as a consequence, since that was being bought by the Turnpike, those projects would now be under the auspice of the Turnpike and Turnpike monies.
So there's the money. So
Not
there's
the
the-
150, though. 150 million.
100
150 million is just for the widening
Just for the
between
widening.
Nashua and Manchester.
Literally.
Paul's asking a separate question altogether.
Okay, I got you then.
I didn't know.
No.
I was
But
asking
what-
if that included it, but if
No,
it's
it
just
doesn't.
Nashua to Manchester, now I understand.
Yeah,
Okay.
but to echo your point, because of them
makes
buying
sense.
those roads, it's now freeing up $210 million to be allocated towards bridges that have been red listed in other particular roadways. So it's,
But Sununu has.
Yeah,
is
it's a
it
clever
VDOT
way
or-
to use tolls to pay for other things.
isn't it?
Right.
Isn't it?
They're using their
And then the other,
wherewithal to move money on.
so I
You're not tucking in there. I've gotten the light blinker. Okay.
and then the other thing, go ahead, I'm sorry, I'll let you,
Nope, I'm
go ahead,
done.
talk so much yourselves.
You finish
That's
what
a
you want
whine.
to
If
say.
ever I heard a whine.
Wine, go ahead.
And then the last piece was that they were, on a positive note, they were going to do some improvement work along 101 between Continental Boulevard, Boston Post Road, and Craftsman Lane. They're going to be widening that particular stretch of road. They're going to be adding some turn lanes to increase the flow of traffic. One of the things that they were proposing was to build a sidewalk on the south side of 101, which 101, excuse me, which really made absolutely no sense to me. And I said, well, you ought to really put it on the north side and be able to link Pennachuck Square, be able to walk down to Joey's Diner. So they're going to be making that particular amendment to the plan. But I thought that was,
There's a lot of accidents in that.
there's a lot of
So
accidents.
that's
So the
probably
fact
why.
that they're looking to widen, they're going to widen and create an
The
additional
Pennachuck.
turn lanes for not just Craftsman Lane, but for Boston Post Road,
Yeah.
I really thought was good news. And I think I have this on a slide deck that I'd be happy to, I will forward to the council. I think the proposed construction pending completion of engineering is 2020, I think is when they're gonna begin that. And one of the things that I asked is, I know that Pennachuck had done some, with NVD, they had done some water main updates down by Talrico in regards.
Sounds right.
Yeah, so I just asked them, and they said that they usually coordinate with that. So-
That's that pump, the switch.
Thank you.
It's right there on,
That's right.
in between, on 101A, right by, going into Home Depot, right there on the right.
That's right.
That's
That's right.
The flow switch, one way or the other. If we
The
need water-
emergency.
The emergency, if we need water from Pennachuck. that's
Most
where it comes
recently,
from.
right.
So I'll send the information along in a separate email. If you want me to send it to you directly, I can. If not, if you want me to send it to Eileen, I can, whatever.
Send it to
whatever.
Eileen.
Directly, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to pass that along. And thank you.
Thank you, Council.
You're welcome, Councilor Robert.
I find it fascinating that the state is now deciding that these old culverts need to be expanded, much like we're having to do on Bedford Road. For any of these culverts that we're replacing, we're being told we have to replace this 6-foot pipe with a 30-foot bridge span or something like that. And now the state's at least coughing up and saying, oh, we got to do that too.
So one other piece to dovetail off of what Councilor Koenig is alluding to, on 101 in Bedford, right on the Amherst line, is Pulpit Brook. And it's two culverts that go underneath 101 right there. They're actually proposing to rip up the road, remove the culverts, and actually put a bridge there. So what that means is that section of 101, they're going to be diverting traffic. So the eastbound traffic coming from Milford is actually going to have to go into Merrimack and loop around that particular location. And then the westbound traffic is going to have to go in through Bedford and cut through Amherst and then come down, I think, on Horace Greeley Road. And again, I think that's a 2021 project that they're looking at. So, interesting times.
Crazy. Tom?
And the planning board did meet on Tuesday. There were a couple of things that were postponed, but what we did get was not a formal application for the 280 units where the old Merrimack Hotel was, but a presentation of the general plan and discussion that was non-binding. And they are, as Eileen mentioned earlier, planning to come in January to make a formal presentation request to be able to build those units. And I guess they gave a good presentation. They talked about what they want to build there. They showed some architectural renderings of what they expect it to look like without the Wood Springs Hotel in the view. But you had to be standing about right there to see that view. So it looks positive overall, what they're planning to do. There's going to be plenty of parking, at least for the first 3 buildings that are up by the Wood Springs. The questionable piece right now is the 2 additional buildings that are going to be in between the Cinemagic and where the old hotel was, kind of by themselves and off to the side. So when you think of 280 units and you think of them all in one spot where that hotel was, that's a huge concentration. If you realize that they're actually putting, 88 or 100 of them or something like that in these 2 buildings that are off in the next piece down the road, they're spread out enough that they're not all stacked up on top of each other. The way they're proposing. Now, they are also proposing these to be mostly 1 and some 2-bedroom units. No 3-bedroom units that I understand. So they have a clientele they're going after. They're planning on market rates. They're going to have a little clubhouse with a gym and some meeting space and stuff built in there as well. So I think that everything they said and talked about sounded like they were being sensitive to the water that goes behind there, Babusick Brook. They're sensitive to their environment, who they're dealing with. They're also sensitive to the additional commercial property that's around there and parking requirements, because with that influx of people, they're expecting other expansions as well as far as support services and stuff like that. And they're taking into account the impact that those are going to have as far as parking and access and things. So it sounds like they're doing a good job. These are going to be rental apartments. They're not going to be sold as condos. So you have one business entity responsible for maintaining parking and traffic and all that kind of stuff, signages and stuff. So we're not looking at 280 individual units of responsibility for snow removal and all that kind of stuff. So that part of it was somewhat encouraging. The traffic issue will probably get better with the recommendations that they're talking about. It is predicated on the state working with them on the light at Executive Park Drive and the other intersections of Greeley and things of that nature to try and alleviate some of those situations. They're not going to make it worse. May not make it much better, but at least they won't make it any worse from what we're gathering from the traffic reports. And Bob asked him to go off and look at other units similar to this as far as size and density and access with just one road in, and do an actual traffic count on a real live place. And they went to a place, I don't remember the name of it, and did traffic counts and literally came up with numbers less than the traffic counts that were predicted by the ITRAC or whatever the International Traffic Board is. So that was actually encouraging as well, because the transportation people always calculate their numbers based on this national standard. And when they went out and counted actual traffic over a couple of days and then applied those same balancing figures from the national standards, it came out that the traffic there was less than what was predicted by those national standards. So that was somewhat encouraging as well. Effectively, that was it. We went through the CIP and things like that as well.
They were very excited to see the CIP.
The planning board
Right,
was?
right. Very excited.
Bill?
Yeah, just a question for Tom. Was there any presentation regarding the roadway on Executive, because the roadway on Executive Drive is a little rough, and the egress onto the turnpike, that left-hand turn to go into the turnpike, I find, it's big. You can get a car through, but was there any conversation of doing any widening at that location? Or is it still?
That's site plan work that would
Okay.
that would only come in after they bring in an actual plan. So no, they didn't talk about that specifically.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, well, I'll finish by wishing everyone happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year. And may everyone in the community have a wonderful holiday season, and may we all be happy and healthy in the coming year.
And let's keep the police and fire unbusy, and
That's
have a
right.
safe and happy holiday season.
That's right. Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
The two Toms. Tom Koenig made the motion. Tom Thornton got the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, none opposed, 600. Good night, Merrimack.